Good afternoon to all. On behalf of the Kerala State Planning Board, Government of Kerala, I welcome our esteemed guests to the Kerala Looks Ahead conference. We are honored to have you here today in the session on modern skill development. Before we proceed to the session, I would like to draw the kind attention of all participants towards certain guidelines to be followed in this online conference session. I request all participants to mute their audio while others are speaking. Participants are requested to address their queries through the chat box and use the discussion time to express their views or clarify their doubts. I also request speakers to strictly adhere to the scheduled time of their sessions. We look forward to an interesting session. Now I request Professor Mridul Eapan, Member State Planning Board, to welcome the gathering.
So, good afternoon to all. Can I be heard, Bindu?
Yes, ma'am. You are audible.
Good afternoon to all. I am so happy to welcome all of you to this session on modern skill development. We have placed a lot of significance on this session, trying to draw in as many international best practices as possible, because skill development is basic to the advancement of all sectors in the economy and for all peoples, from the less educated to the highly educated and to the lifelong learners. The fact that in recent years and within a short span of time, uh, a few developing economies have managed to grow into the fastest growing economies of the world on the backs of vibrant technical and vocational education systems is an important lesson to learn, particularly the fact that education, training, skilling, and the economy need to develop parallelly, complementing each other to meet not only the current demands of the economy, but also anticipate and build competencies for jobs in the future. What is important is a smooth transition the young workers can make from training and education into employment. Now that the state was the lead actor in developing such systems in these economies, helping also to bring about some unification between technical, vocational education and higher education, with necessary ladders and bridges, of course, shows us the opportunities open to states like Kerala, which have an educated population and a vast range of skilling institutions. Now, with the pandemic, so much disruption has taken place in education and job structures, with new technology-driven skills growing rapidly, an issue, of course, which we discussed in the session. But one thing is very clear, that the digital economy will come to play a significant role in our lives, impacting on education, skilling, and employment, changing traditional ways of teaching and learning, and how the challenges will be met is yet unfolding. Do we need a new approach is also a question being asked. At the same time, the need to maintain equity across genders and disadvantaged groups and efficiency cannot be underemphasized. Let me now specifically welcome the two ministers, Shri T.P. Ramakrishnan, Minister for Labor and Labor Welfare, and Srimati K.K. Shailaja Teacher, Minister for Health, Family Welfare, Social Justice and Women and Child Development, who are not able to appear online because of their official commitments, but their recorded remarks will be relayed. Then, of course, we have the speakers who come from Korea, from ILO, Germany, and India, whom I welcome heartily, as also the two discussants that we have. Let me finally welcome all the participants, very diverse in nature, policymakers, officials, academia, students, NGOs, training institutions, business community who are watching and listening to this session. And what we're all trying to do is to learn, adopt, and adapt whatever is possible from the international best practices being presented here. I now hand over the proceedings to my colleague, Dr. Devi Raman, who's chairing the session and is also a member of the planning board. Thank you.
സഹോദരി സഹോദരന്മാരെ, ആധുനിക കേരളത്തിൻ്റെ സുശക്തമായ ഭാവി രൂപപ്പെടുത്തുന്നതിനുള്ള സുപ്രധാന ഇടപെടലായി മാറുന്ന അന്തർദേശീയ കോൺഫറൻസിൽ സംബന്ധിക്കുന്ന എല്ലാവരെയും കേരളത്തിലെ ഇടതുപക്ഷ ജനാധിപത്യ മുന്നണി ഗവൺമെൻറ്റിന് വേണ്ടി അഭിവാദ്യം ചെയ്യുന്നു. സാമൂഹ്യ സാമ്പത്തിക അടിസ്ഥാന സൗകര്യ മേഖലകൾ ശക്തിപ്പെടുത്തി നവകേരളം സൃഷ്ടിക്കാനുള്ള സംസ്ഥാന സർക്കാരിൻ്റെ ബൃഹത്തായ ദൗത്യത്തിന് ഈ സമ്മേളനവും ഇവിടെ ഉയരുന്ന ചർച്ചകളും കരുത്തു പകരും. നവീന വികസന മാതൃകകളിലേക്ക് കേരളത്തെ നയിക്കുകയെന്ന ലക്ഷ്യത്തോടെ രാജ്യാന്തര സമ്മേളനം ഒരുക്കിയ ആസൂത്രണ ബോർഡിനെ അഭിനന്ദിക്കുന്നു. ലോകം ഉറ്റുനോക്കുന്ന തനത് വികസന ക്ഷേമ മാതൃകകളുടെ ഉടമകളാണ് നമ്മൾ. സമൂഹത്തിൻ്റെ അടിത്തട്ടിൽ കഴിയുന്നവരും പാർശ്വവൽക്കരിക്കപ്പെട്ടവരും ഉൾപ്പെടെ മുഴുവൻ ജനവിഭാഗങ്ങളെയും ഉൾക്കൊള്ളുന്ന സർവതല സ്പർശിയായ വികസന മാതൃകയാണ് കേരളത്തിൻ്റേത്. സാമൂഹ്യനീതിയിൽ അധിഷ്ഠിതമായ കേരളത്തിൻ്റെ സവിശേഷമായ വികസന പ്രക്രിയക്ക് 1957 EMS ഗവൺമെൻറ്റാണ് അടിത്തറയിട്ടത്. വിദ്യാഭ്യാസം, ആരോഗ്യം, സാമൂഹ്യ സുരക്ഷ, ഭൂമിയിലെ ഉടമസ്ഥാവകാശവും കിടപ്പാടവും, തൊഴിലവകാശങ്ങളുടെ സംരക്ഷണം തുടങ്ങി വിവിധ രംഗങ്ങളിൽ അഭൂതപൂർവമായ പുരോഗതി നാം കൈവരിച്ചു. ഈ നേട്ടം ശക്തിപ്പെടുത്തുകയും ആധുനിക കാലത്തെ മാറ്റങ്ങൾക്കനുസൃതമായി പുതിയ മേഖലകളിലേക്ക് പ്രസരിപ്പിക്കുകയും ചെയ്യേണ്ടത് ഇന്നത്തെ അടിയന്തര കടമയായി കാണണം. വിവര സാങ്കേതികവിദ്യയുടെ അതിവേഗത്തിലുള്ള വികാസം തൊഴിലിൻ്റെ ഘടനയിലും സ്വഭാവത്തിലും വലിയ മാറ്റങ്ങൾ വരുത്തിക്കൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്നു. ലോകക്രമങ്ങൾ മാറ്റിമറിച്ച COVID-19 തൊഴിൽ മേഖലയിൽ ഉണ്ടാക്കിയ മാന്ദ്യം വിവരണാതീതമാണ്. അതേസമയം പ്രധാന മേഖലകളിൽ പുതിയ അവസരങ്ങൾ ഉയർന്നു വരുന്നു. എവിടെയിരുന്നും ജോലി ചെയ്യാം എന്ന അവസ്ഥയും കോവിഡിൻ്റെ ഉൽപ്പന്നമായി ഒട്ടേറെ മേഖലകളിൽ രൂപപ്പെട്ടിട്ടുണ്ട്. ഉൽപ്പാദന സേവന മേഖലകളുടെ ആധുനികവൽക്കരണത്തിന് മുൻഗണന നൽകേണ്ടതുണ്ട്. പരമ്പരാഗത വ്യവസായ മേഖലകൾ ഉൾപ്പെടെ എല്ലാ തൊഴിൽദായക മേഖലകളും സംരക്ഷിക്കുകയും തൊഴിൽ ഉറപ്പുവരുത്തുകയും ചെയ്യുന്നതോടൊപ്പം ആധുനികവൽക്കരണത്തിലൂടെ ഉൽപ്പാദനക്ഷമതയും തൊഴിലവസരങ്ങളും വർദ്ധിപ്പിക്കാനുള്ള നടപടി സ്വീകരിക്കണം. നൈപുണ്യ വികസനത്തിലൂടെ അറിവും കഴിവുകളും വികസിപ്പിച്ച് മാത്രമേ തൊഴിൽ കമ്പോളത്തിലെ മാറ്റങ്ങളും അവസരങ്ങളും ഉപയോഗപ്പെടുത്താനാവൂ. ലോകത്തെല്ലായിടത്തും തൊഴിൽ മേഖലകളിൽ കേരളത്തിൻ്റെ മികച്ച സാന്നിധ്യമുണ്ട്. പ്രൊഫഷണലുകളും അവിദഗ്ധ തൊഴിലാളികളും ഉൾപ്പെടുന്ന ഈ തൊഴിൽ സേനയുടെ അറിവും തൊഴിൽ ശേഷിയും അർപ്പണബോധവും പൊതുവെ രാജ്യത്തിനകത്തും പുറത്തും നിന്ന് അഭിനന്ദനത്തിന് പാത്രമായിട്ടുണ്ട്. കേരളത്തിൽ നിന്നുള്ള തൊഴിലാളികളെ തിരഞ്ഞെടുക്കുന്ന കാര്യത്തിൽ വലിയ താല്പര്യമാണ് ലോകമെങ്ങു നിന്നും ഉണ്ടാകുന്നത്. ഈ സാഹചര്യങ്ങളെ കണക്കിലെടുത്ത് നൈപുണ്യശേഷിയുള്ള യുവതലമുറയെ വാർത്തെടുക്കാൻ ലക്ഷ്യം വെച്ചുള്ള വിവിധ പദ്ധതികൾ സഖാവ് പിണറായി വിജയൻ നേതൃത്വം നൽകുന്ന സർക്കാർ നടപ്പാക്കി വരികയാണ്. വിദ്യാഭ്യാസ രംഗത്തും സാങ്കേതിക വ്യാവസായിക പരിശീലന മേഖലകളിലും ഈ കാഴ്ചപ്പാട് പ്രാവർത്തികമാക്കിയിട്ടുണ്ട്. കേരള അക്കാഡമി ഫോർ സ്കിൽസ് എക്സലൻസിനെ സംസ്ഥാന നൈപുണ്യ മിഷനായി പ്രഖ്യാപിച്ചു. വിവിധ സ്ഥാപനങ്ങളും ഏജൻസികളുമായി ചേർന്ന് കേരള അക്കാഡമി ഫോർ സ്കിൽ എക്സലൻസ് മികവിൻ്റെ കേന്ദ്രങ്ങൾ ആവിഷ്കരിച്ചിട്ടുണ്ട്. വ്യാവസായിക പരിശീലന വകുപ്പിന് കീഴിലുള്ള സർക്കാർ ITIകൾ നൈപുണ്യ വികസനത്തിന് ഊന്നൽ നൽകി പരിശീലന പദ്ധതി പരിഷ്കരിച്ചു. നിർമ്മാണ മേഖലയിലെ പുതിയ തൊഴിൽ സാധ്യതകൾ കണക്കിലെടുത്ത് ഈ ഗവൺമെൻറ് കേരള ഇൻസ്റ്റിറ്റ്യൂട്ട് ഓഫ് ഇൻഫ്രാസ്ട്രക്ചർ ആൻഡ് കൺസ്ട്രക്ഷൻ ആരംഭിച്ചു. പഠനവും പരിശീലനവും പൂർത്തിയാക്കുന്നവർക്ക് നൈപുണ്യ വികസനത്തിന് ഇവിടെ അവസരമുണ്ട്. കോഴ്സുകൾ പൂർത്തിയായ ബഹുഭൂരിപക്ഷത്തിനും പ്ലേസ്മെൻറ്റ് ലഭിച്ചു. കരിയർ ഡെവലപ്മെൻറ്റ് സെൻ്ററുകളും എംപ്ലോയബിലിറ്റി സെൻ്ററുകളും വഴി തൊഴിലന്വേഷകർക്ക് ഈ ഗവൺമെൻറ് വിപുലമായ പരിശീലന സൗകര്യം ഏർപ്പെടുത്തിയിട്ടുണ്ട്. സ്കൂൾ തലം മുതൽ വ്യക്തിത്വ വികാസത്തിനും അഭിരുചികൾ മനസ്സിലാക്കി കഴിവുകൾ വളർത്തുന്നതിനും സർക്കാർ ലക്ഷ്യമിടുന്നു. ഇതിനുതകുന്ന കരിയർ നയത്തിന് സർക്കാർ രൂപം നൽകി വരികയാണ്. പ്രധാന മേഖലകളിൽ ഉയർന്നു വരുന്ന പുതിയ അവസരങ്ങളും ആവശ്യവും പ്രയോജനപ്പെടുത്തുന്നതിന് യുവതലമുറയെ സജ്ജരാക്കുന്നതിനുതകും വിധം ഉയർന്ന നിലവാരത്തിലുള്ള നൈപുണ്യ പരിശീലന പദ്ധതി നടപ്പാക്കും. റോബോട്ടിക്സ്, മെഷീൻ ലേണിംഗ്, നിർമ്മിത ബുദ്ധി, 3D പ്രിൻറ്റിംഗ് എന്നീ മേഖലകളിൽ വിവരസാങ്കേതിക വിദ്യയുടെ സാധ്യതകൾ ഉപയോഗപ്പെടുത്തിയുള്ള ഇടപെടലിന് കേരളം ഇതിനകം തുടക്കം കുറിച്ചു. IT അധിഷ്ഠിത സേവനങ്ങൾ, ഗതാഗതം, സംഭരണം, ആശയവിനിമയം, ബാങ്കിംഗ്, ഇൻഷുറൻസ്, നിർമ്മാണ മേഖല, ആരോഗ്യ പരിരക്ഷ, ഭക്ഷ്യസംസ്കരണം, ടൂറിസം തുടങ്ങിയ മേഖലകളിൽ കേരളത്തിൽ ധാരാളം തൊഴിലവസരങ്ങൾ ഉണ്ട്. ഇവ ഉപയോഗപ്പെടുത്തുന്നതിന് തുടർച്ചയായ നൈപുണ്യ വികസന പരിപാടികൾ നടപ്പിലാക്കും. വികസിച്ചു വരുന്ന മേഖലകളിൽ സ്ത്രീകൾക്ക് മികച്ച പ്രാതിനിധ്യം ഉറപ്പാക്കുന്നതിനാവശ്യമായ നൈപുണ്യ പരിശീലനം നൽകണം. പട്ടികജാതി പട്ടികവർഗ യുവാക്കളെ ശാക്തീകരിക്കുന്നതിന് മുൻഗണന വേണം. തിരുവനന്തപുരം പാലോട്ട് ഈ ഗവൺമെൻറ് ആരംഭിച്ച ആദ്യത്തെ ട്രൈബൽ എംപ്ലോയ്മെൻറ്റ് എക്സ്ചേഞ്ച് കം കരിയർ ഡെവലപ്മെൻറ്റ് സെൻറ്റർ ഈ ദിശയിലുള്ള പ്രധാന ചുവടുവെപ്പാണ്. സംയോജിത നൈപുണ്യ വികസന നയചട്ടക്കൂടുകളും സംവിധാനങ്ങളും വികസിപ്പിക്കേണ്ടതിൻ്റെ ആവശ്യകത ചർച്ചയ്ക്ക് വിധേയമാക്കണം. നൈപുണ്യ പരിശീലനത്തിൽ തൊഴിൽശാലകളുടെ പങ്കാളിത്തം ഉറപ്പുവരുത്തുന്നത് ആലോചിക്കണം. തൊഴിൽ കമ്പോളങ്ങളിലെ ആവശ്യകതയും ഭാവിയിലെ തൊഴിലവസരങ്ങളും കണക്കിലെടുത്ത് പരിശീലന പദ്ധതികൾ ആവിഷ്കരിക്കണം. നിലവാരമുള്ള തൊഴിൽ പരിശീലന സമ്പ്രദായം കെട്ടിപ്പടുക്കുകയും യുവതലമുറയ്ക്കുള്ള പരിശീലന പദ്ധതിയിൽ കൂടുതൽ നൈപുണികൾ ഉൾപ്പെടുത്തുകയും വേണം. സ്ത്രീകൾക്ക് മികച്ച പ്രാതിനിധ്യം നൽകി തൊഴിൽ പരിശീലന ലഭ്യത വർദ്ധിപ്പിക്കണം. സംസ്ഥാന സർക്കാർ രൂപം നൽകിയ ജോബ് പോർട്ടൽ തൊഴിലന്വേഷകർക്കും തൊഴിലുടമകൾക്കും ഒരേ പ്ലാറ്റ്ഫോമിൽ വരാനുള്ള സൗകര്യം നൽകുന്നു. ജോബ് പോർട്ടലിൻ്റെ സാധ്യതകൾ വർദ്ധിപ്പിക്കാൻ നടപടിയെടുക്കും. ദൈനംദിന ആവശ്യങ്ങൾക്ക് വിദഗ്ധ അവിദഗ്ധ തൊഴിലാളികളെ ലഭ്യമാക്കുന്ന സ്കിൽ രജിസ്ട്രി സംസ്ഥാന സർക്കാരിൻ്റെ മറ്റൊരു ശ്രദ്ധേയമായ ഇടപെടലാണ്. നൈപുണ്യ വികസനം ഉയർന്ന പരിഗണന നൽകേണ്ട മേഖലയായി സർക്കാർ കാണുന്നു. മടങ്ങിയെത്തുന്ന പ്രൊഫഷണലുകൾ ഉൾപ്പെടെയുള്ള പ്രവാസികൾക്ക് നൈപുണ്യ പരിശീലനം നൽകി സംസ്ഥാനത്തിൻ്റെ തൊഴിൽ മേഖലയുടെ ഭാഗമാക്കാനുള്ള സാധ്യത ഉപയോഗപ്പെടുത്തും. ഇതോടൊപ്പമാണ് അഭ്യസ്ത വിദ്യരുടെ നൈപുണ്യം ഉയർത്താനുള്ള പദ്ധതി ആവിഷ്കരിക്കും. സംരംഭകത്വം പ്രോത്സാഹിപ്പിച്ച് തൊഴിലവസരങ്ങൾ വർദ്ധിപ്പിക്കാം. കേരള അക്കാഡമി ഫോർ സ്കിൽസ് എക്സലൻസ്, അസാപ്പ്, ICT അക്കാഡമി എന്നിവ വഴിയുള്ള നൈപുണ്യ വികസന പരിശീലന പദ്ധതികൾ വിപുലീകരിക്കും. ആധുനിക സാങ്കേതികവിദ്യയുടെ പ്രയോജനം എല്ലാവരിലേക്കും എത്തിക്കുന്നതിന് സംസ്ഥാന സർക്കാർ പദ്ധതി ആവിഷ്കരിച്ചിട്ടുണ്ട്. വൈജ്ഞാനിക സമൂഹത്തെ സൃഷ്ടിക്കുകയാണ് സംസ്ഥാന സർക്കാരിൻ്റെ ലക്ഷ്യം. പരമ്പരാഗത കാർഷിക മേഖലകളിൽ ഉൾപ്പെടെ നൈപുണ്യ വികസനത്തിൻ്റെ സാധ്യതകൾ സർക്കാർ ഗൗരവമായി പരിഗണിച്ചു വരികയാണ്. ഗ്രാമവികസനത്തിലൂടെ സുസ്ഥിരവും ഐശ്വര്യപൂർണവുമായ ഭാവി കേരളം യാഥാർത്ഥ്യമാക്കുന്നതിന് നൈപുണ്യ വികസന പദ്ധതികൾ വിപുലമാക്കി നൈപുണ്യശേഷിയുള്ള തൊഴിൽ ശക്തിയെ വാർത്തെടുക്കുന്നതിന് ഈ സമ്മേളനം മാർഗദർശനം നൽകട്ടെ എന്ന് ആശംസിച്ചുകൊണ്ട് എൻ്റെ വാക്കുകൾ അവസാനിപ്പിക്കുന്നു. എല്ലാവർക്കും കേരള ഗവൺമെൻറ്റിന് വേണ്ടി അഭിവാദ്യങ്ങൾ അർപ്പിക്കുന്നു.
Respected dignitaries who are participating in this August seminar, my dear brothers and sisters, first of all, I want to congratulate our planning board for organizing such a webinar on the theme Kerala Looks Ahead. And this session we have to discuss about the skill development. And first of all, I want to say that in this new era, everything we should have to renew and to achieve the most modern knowledge and technology to fight with the new challenges. Kerala is famous for the skilled workers and also for the systematic knowledge development programs and skill development programs. And it is saying that the most of the expatriates is from Kerala, and Kerala had a reputation throughout the world to there is a demand for the skilled workers from Kerala. But we know that we have to walk miles to attain the knowledge exposure and the new technology we have to do several things to achieve the most modern technologies. And skill development is the most important thing. Skill training and development play a crucial role to promoting economic growth throughout the world. During this pandemic season, it is underlined that without the new technology, we cannot move forward. Due to the challenges of the pandemic, the economic sector, it shows a slowdown, and there are some difficulties in every sector, industries, and every sector we are facing a diminishing trend. We have to move forward and to find a solution for it, and that is nothing but the skilled labor and skill training and the activities depending upon the skill developments. And Kerala is trying to do that. The COVID-19 pandemic made a great challenge throughout the world. But with the challenges, we have new opportunities also. We should find out what are the opportunities left by the pandemic and the challenge. And we should promote that opportunities, and we should move forward in that direction. I think the new technologies developed during this COVID-19 pandemic, and Kerala is also made some startups and other robotics and the machine learning and artificial intelligence, etc. In that sector, Kerala moved forward during this pandemic season also. We should develop that, and we should train the youths and the entire society to compete with the world technologies. We have to address the question of egalitarian progress in the work sector. International Labour Organization points out gender gaps persist globally in women's access to skill development and participation in labor market. It is necessary, therefore, that countries to focus specifically on gender in national skills development policies and strategies. Create gender sensitive training environments. Create opportunities and encourage men to engage in social and care work. To enable women to participate in lifelong learning opportunities. In the light of COVID-19 pandemics, work has intensified for women who bear the responsibility of household and care work with the closure of institutions. It is essential that special support to be provided to overcome the gender digital divide so that women can participate equally in digital learning and emerging technology intensive areas of work, in addition to challenging traditional gender roles. We should follow the suggestions of ILO policy. And here in Kerala, Women and Children Department is organizing a international conference on gender equality under the leadership of Gender Park, and the theme is the sustainable development and social business. Eminent personalities are participating in it, and our discussion, I think it will cover the all aspects of the gender equality and also the new technology and the provisions or in future our expectation is to it will provide opportunity to discuss about the social business and also opportunity to women entrepreneurships in social business and sustainable development. We should start this kind of attempts to provocate or promote women entrepreneurships and also to educated women to intervene or we should promote educated women to participate in the skill development and also sustainable development and entrepreneurships, and that way we can solve the problems of the discrimination and the problems of, and challenges of the COVID-19 pandemics and other challenges arising in this new era. And in that point of view, this session is most important one in the webinar series of Kerala Looks Ahead. I think we will get some points or some conclusions and some directions after this discussion and the webinar, and we are eagerly waiting for that output. And I welcome all the participants, and with hope that we will have some solutions for these problems after this webinar. We get some solutions, and I hope for that. With these few words, I declare this session is inaugurated.
Now I invite Professor Raviraman to take over the session.
May I now request Professor V.K. Ramachandran to make his remarks. He is the chief architect of this conference. So, Professor V.K.R., please. Professor V.K. Ramachandran? Professor V.K. Ramachandran, can you hear me? Hello? Hello, Professor V.K.R.? We can hear you.
You carry on, then VC will join later.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Bindu. Thank you so much. So we are going to have our the core part of this session. That means we will have our presentations. We have 6 presentations scheduled in this session, and then we have 2 discussions. I would request the presenters to take maximum 15 minutes each, and then the discussions may take 10 minutes each, so that we will have sufficient time for open discussion. We have a galaxy of scholars here. We have Professor Joo-Ho Lee, for instance, who served at the Minister of Education, Science and Technology of Republic of South Korea from 2010 to 2013. We also have Peter Rahman from Germany, Suki Gupta from ILO headquarters, Geneva, and Gabriel Bordado, the country office, ILO, Delhi. We have Atul Kumar Tiwari, IAS, from the Ministry of Skill Development on Entrepreneurship, Government of India, and Professor Santosh Mehrotra from Jawaharlal Nehru University, and Professor Jimol Uni from the Ahmedabad University. So we have a galaxy of scholars here. Before inviting Professor Joo-Ho Lee, may I add a couple of words. We all know that, of course, Professor Bhagilipan has already pointed out the importance of this conference. We all know that Kerala has been briefly mentioned in the that we have the potential to be India's skilled labor hub. We all know that state in this potential. In fact, it is well known that there are Malayalis all across the world working in various fields, but none of this has tapped the full potential of the population. So the question is, how can Kerala enrich its skills, potential, and transform the economy and society? We all know that this is a time when the future of work debate is at its peak. This is largely because of the very change that has taken place in the larger context of work and works culture. We all know that the first major shift that has been taking place is the transformation of workplaces to workspaces. That means the work could be done irrespective of physical spaces, physical places. The second major shift is in terms of time, with the fixed time gradually fading away to flexible patterns. The third major shift is in terms of gender, a point which has already been mentioned by our Minister for Health and Family Welfare. And nowadays we find gender neutrality becoming the order of the day. Fourth, we have already entered into the fourth industrial revolution, as articulated more in terms of the fusion of various technologies and artificial intelligence and machine learning. So there is a strong need for a comparative cross-national knowledge sharing and exchange of ideas. I repeat, there is a strong need for a comparative cross-national knowledge sharing and exchange of ideas. So we really would like to learn from you. That's the basic idea of this conference. We wanted to know more about the country experiences, and we also wanted to know some what is called enlightenment critical aspects on this, in what way that we can enrich our population and so on. Because at the moment, I have this feeling that Kerala is a knowledge society. Now the major task is how best we can transform this knowledge society into a knowledge economy. So I would obviously welcome you again, and I also welcome once more the participants. So I request our
my link has been restored, Ravi. Dr. Ravi, my link has been restored.
Okay, thank you so much. Just could you please wait just 1 second? Yeah. So before inviting Professor Ju Ho Lee, I would request our Vice Chairperson, Professor V.K. Ramachandran, to make a few remarks. Professor Ramachandran?
Thank you very much. Thank you. Distinguished participants in this conference and in this session of the conference, participants from Kerala, from the rest of India, from Europe, particularly from the ILO in Geneva, and from Germany, our participants from South Korea, and all the people from different parts of the world who are watching on the other platforms. Welcome once again to Kerala Looks Ahead, and we are honored by your presence here today. Thank you. I think our basic objective is to make into a reality something that Kerala has the potential to be. That is to be the skilled labor hub of India. We are Kerala's, many of you are in different ways familiar with the Kerala experience, but Kerala's experience, we believe, shows that the well-being of the people can be improved and social condition transformed by enlightened public action. When the present government of Kerala came to office in 2016, we were the only state in India to decide that the process of economic planning would continue. We, to be more particular, we decided that we would continue to deepen and extend the achievements that Kerala has in the general sphere of human development. But to use these achievements as a foundation on which to create new skilled employment opportunities for the people, particularly for youth, to increase incomes from production in industry, agriculture, income-bearing services, and to build our infrastructure. One of the very important changes, some of the very important changes in the last 4 years that are of great relevance to skill development is, well, to start with, the strengthening of high school, all levels of school education in the public sector. Kerala is the only state in India where there's been an influx into the public sector of education from the private sector. More than 500,000 students have actually come into the public sector to government schools in the last few years because of the greater attention, the new infrastructure that is being built, the greater quality, the greater attention that is being paid to quality in our schooling system over the last few years. We have also seen a growth in Kerala in IT-enabled services, transport, storage and communication, banking, insurance, in construction, in healthcare and medical equipment, in food processing, tourism, and in hospitality, all of which have great potential for employment and, of course, for skilled employment. So it is over the years, so our sort of assets have built up in this field. We have, therefore, a relative abundance of educated and skilled workers, a long history of entrepreneurship, and an exposure to the wider world. Kerala's workers are known not only in India, but they have been the preferred choice of employers in not only in different parts of India, but in different parts of the world. Given this, we are extremely keen on what we can learn from the world in the sphere of skill development and employability for our youth. This is, as I said, at the core of our efforts, at the core of our development efforts, and we could not have got a better group of people to discuss this with us, to discuss their experiences, to discuss the best practices in their countries and that their organizations have noted. And you may be interested to know that you've probably seen our schedule. We have sessions on industry, on IT, on e-governance, on agriculture, and so on, and tourism, all of which, but your session is a session that is of great relevance to every other session in this conference. So we watched this session with keenness and expectation. Once again, may I thank you all for having joined us, and thank you. I look forward to the conclusions of the deliberations of your session. Thank you very much.
We have 6%. I would please, Juholi. Over to you, Juholi. Yeah, thank you.
Can you hear me? Okay, thank you very much for having me for this very meaningful event. I'm very honored and happy to share South Korea's experience of high-touch, high-tech education, transforming education after COVID-19. So I first talk about education in the era of the fourth industrial revolution, and then try to explain what high-touch, high-tech education is. And then I will highlight high-touch, high-tech initiatives of Education Commission Asia. So we have a really great sea change in education in the era of fourth industrial revolution, especially after the pandemic. The pandemic is accelerating the change in education. The major change occurs in the area of how we teach and how we learn. And the major direction of change is from mass standardization to mass personalization. You know that the way of teaching and learning resembles the standardized production, mass production in the factory, all the factory, maybe 100 or 115 years ago. You know that. So we used to learn to take tests, but this should be changed, transformed to learning to learn when we really make a transformation toward mass personalization. And also the vertical learning based on lectures, I mean, professors, teachers giving lectures while students taking notes. This is one way transfer of knowledge. But we really do need to have horizontal learning, encouraging students to work with peer students to do projects under the teachers playing the role as facilitators or coach, and the shallow learning, like rote learning based on memorization and so forth, should be transformed into deep learning, focusing more on basic concept and higher order thinking skills like analyzing, applying, and creating. So this big transformation is now occurring thanks to the fourth industrial revolution technologies. And particularly the AI-powered edutech allows us to do personalized learning. So you know that intelligent tutoring system, or we can call adaptive learning system, is really amazing technologies. But it's now being more developed to provide a dialogue-based tutoring system, also ELEs, chatbots, VR and AR, and maybe in the near future we can have AI learning companion and AI teaching assistant. So we have those amazing technologies, but it should be combined with the classroom teaching. So technology alone cannot make a big change in learning. So we have to really try to combine high tech with high touch. So this is the spirit of high touch, high tech learning. And we can see the really wonderful result utilizing intelligent tutoring system or AI tutor. You know that this diagram shows how students can have different problems when they have the same in the same classroom. Some students couldn't understand what they learned 3 years ago, and some students don't understand what they learned 1 year ago, but they are at the same classroom. So there has been a big challenge for teachers to provide the right level of teaching to different students with really diverse levels of learning. So these problems can be solved through AI tutor system, because AI tutor system can help identify what a student does or doesn't know through the AI-powered diagnostic test. And then AI tutor can help develop a personalized learning path for each student. So in this diagram, there are different students with having different problems. The typical teacher cannot provide personalized learning opportunity for every student in the classroom. It's too much for teachers. But if teachers can utilize AI tutor in this system, teacher can provide personalized learning for every student. So this is quite well known, the pyramid of Bloom's taxonomy. So the students first learn to remember, and then learn to understand, and then move on to learn to apply, analyze, evaluate, and create. But in the typical classroom, students just learn to remember and understand, because it's too much for teachers to encourage students to apply, analyze, evaluate, and create, because they have to deliver contents, standardized contents to every student. That's too much burden for teachers. But if teachers can utilize AI tutors or intelligent tutoring system, teachers can let AI tutor to provide learning opportunity for understanding and remembering for students, and then they can move on to a higher level of learning, applying, analyzing, evaluating, creating, as well as social and emotional learning through human connections. So through this kind of new way of high-touch, high-tech, you can really provide much better learning opportunity for every student. So there has been evidence for this high-touch, high-tech education in various areas. Arizona State University, they are widely known to now provide more than for 20,000 students with an opportunity to study with adaptive learning courseware in more than 12 core courses. And they are working on to providing more than for more than 75% of students with an opportunity to study with adaptive learning courseware in the future. And MindSpark of India is also quite widely known case, attracting a lot of attention worldwide. So let me share the experience of high-touch, high-tech initiatives of Education Commission Asia that's located in Seoul, South Korea. So the Education Commission, led by Gordon Brown, former Prime Minister of the UK and UN Special Envoy for Global Education, established Asia Hub of Education Commission, and it's called Education Commission Asia. It was established last year, and I have a honor to chair this new institution. And we really try to put this new practice of high-touch, high-tech for all, and really want to diffuse this new practice first for South Korea and hopefully for the global in the future. So the major structure of this high-touch, high-tech initiative looks like this. We have University Consortium, K-12 Consortium, and also Global Consortium. And based on the experience of South Korean experience, maybe we can aim at high-touch, high-tech for all global consortium. And we are also working on to have high-touch, high-tech show that could be a really big event for major stakeholders to meet together and share the experience of high-touch, high-tech learning. So in the case of university consortium, we now have 24 member institutions, some four-year universities and also many two-year technical colleges and graduate schools are now starting with their first courses in their campus of high-touch, high-tech learning. So they are introducing AI-assisted the adaptive learning coursewares in their classroom, and the students are now benefiting from this new way of learning from this year. And this is really exciting, the opportunity for me and also those leaders in education, because this is really a different system, different learning system and teaching system. And I think that the pandemic really accelerated this change. I didn't anticipate this large number of institutions will participate in this consortium. But many university leaders find it really important to try fundamental change in learning and teaching, mainly spurred by the pandemic. The pandemic really encouraged universities and technical colleges to try new ways of learning, because typical learning based on face-to-face lecture cannot hold anymore for many colleges. So on the other hand of the platform, the consortium, we also invite adaptive courseware providers, some global and some local. You know that McGraw-Hill, Cengage, Pearson, and Wiley all provide adaptive learning coursewares, but we also encourage domestic local providers to develop coursewares in Korean, and they are starting to develop quite rapidly the advanced coursewares, adaptive coursewares utilizing AI. And K-12 consortium is more complicated one, because you know that to try new learning and teaching methods, schools are not really finding it easy to make a change. So we have university and research institutions, and also NGOs and foundations, as well as edtech companies and local governments to support schools to introduce a high-touch, high-tech learning system. So we are having now 5 major regions, one big city area in Seoul City, and also the Jeju Island, and also some middle-sized city is now trying to introduce this new system. And also we have global consortium. We started this high-touch, high-tech learning for Vietnam. We have a prototype project for 4 international schools in 2019 to 2020. We had a great success, improving test scores by 0.436 standard deviation, which is equivalent to 2 years of learning. So we are really excited to have a very successful implementation of new learning method of high-touch, high-tech learning. But this is only a prototype. So we are preparing for more scaled up project for 40 schools in Vietnam under the assistance of ADB, the Education Commission, Arizona State University. And lastly, the Mr. Gordon Brown, the UN Special Envoy for Education, and also the chair of Education Commission, declared that we will have high-touch, high-tech for all global consortium because he was quite impressed by the successful design and implementation of high-tech learning in South Korea, mainly through Education Commission Asia. So I'm really happy to share this experience because South Korea is now really introducing a new way of learning, really fundamental change in learning and teaching with the assistance of AI-powered adaptive learning coursewares. This is a really new experiment, new trials, but we have been quite successful in implementing this new way of learning for not only for universities, but also for schools, especially for disadvantaged students, and also for global projects. So I really welcome the state of Kerala to join in this exciting endeavor to make a radical change, fundamental change in education. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks, Professor Lee. I understand you won't be available for discussion. So is that okay if you can pick up one or two questions?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay, I would read out. That would be easier for you. We have a question from Vibhuti Patel. He asks, how do you raise finances for HD University?
Yeah.
What's the role of the state? What kind of legislative back is provided by the political system? Are the scholarships and fellowships for those meritorious students who find the cost of learning unaffordable? We have another question from Kusum. How is skill development integrated with HD learning system? Another question from Ajit Sakriya. Can you clarify if HD courses feature in-person teaching at all? Vibhuti Patel again asks a couple of questions, but we have time constraints.
I will address the last question first. It's a very good question. Can you clarify if high-tech courses feature in-person teaching at all? And you know that high-tech courses is working perfectly in the blended learning system. So you have AI tutor preparing students, making students working in advance before they come to the classroom. So they have exercises working with adaptive learning software. And so every student, regardless of their prior knowledge and the speed of knowledge, they work through AI in a very, very personalized way. So this is a lot of burden for professors and teachers, but they do this before the classroom. So it's really a good way for teachers and professors just to focus on project-based learning, active learning, or mentoring system. So this is perfect combination of machine and human being. Teachers, professors focus on social and emotional learning, high order thinking skills, while AI tutors work on more tedious, I mean, the knowledge transfer activities. So it's good question. We have a lot of in-person teaching while we can embrace AI tutoring system. So it's really a blended learning system. And the second question, how is skill development integrated with high-tech learning system? You know that this is not just for general education, it's also for vocational school system and also technical colleges. For example, in higher education, we have a 2-year technical college system. And I showed you that more active participants are from the technical colleges because they really do need basic skills in mathematics, chemistry, and physics. right? So, but the levels are usually very low compared to 4-year students. So, you know that, but professors in technical colleges, they prefer working on the skills on the site rather than forced to teach mathematics and the basic chemistry and so forth. So you can employ AI tutoring system for delivering the opportunity for learning basic subjects. So you know that the skill development and high-touch high-tech learning can go hand in hand. And lastly, how we can raise finances for high-touch high-tech university. You know that this is digital courseware, and the marginal cost of a digital courseware is almost zero. You can introduce it in a small scale. It's expensive, but if you have 25 universities in the consortium, the price will be lowered. So when you join in a consortium, you can actually negotiate very discounted price with the vendors. So and I really expect that because this is a digital technology, the price will be lowered very radically. Thank you very much for your good questions.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Lee. I mean, your wonderful idea of transforming this, what is called the mass standardization into mass personalization of education. Yeah, that's wonderful, in fact. And your notion of this HT approach is again, you know, with the integration of what is called AI tutoring. That's excellent, and I'm sure that we'll find it very meaningful when we apply.
Yeah, I'll be happy to share our experience, work with you.
Yeah. So thank you so much. Thanks a lot for coming and attending this.
Thank
conference. You. Yeah. May I now go for the second speaker, of course, Srinivas Reddy. I forgot to mention his name earlier. I'm sorry about that. But now I am going to invite Peter Rahman, Deputy Head, German Office for International Cooperation in Vocational Education and Training. Actually, Peter Rahman is a trained economist from University of Cologne, and I understand he was also a master's student at SOIAS, where I taught a few years. I mean, as a teaching fellow, not as a professor or like that. So, Peter, thank you so much, and I'm sure that you have a whole lot of things to say about Germany. That's the main center of what is called the vocational education and other kinds of training. So, Peter, the floor is open for you. Thank you.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, depending on wherever you are at this time.
Peter, please.
Hello.
Hi, Peter.
Yes.
Please continue.
Okay. Is the microphone open now? Okay. I would like to focus in my presentation a little bit on the vocational training. We heard this morning from the minister that Kerala is also thinking about introducing a vocational training system or changing their system. And I work for the Federal Institute for Vocational Education and Training, and I would like to share with you some ideas that we have about best practices in our vocational training system. I will look at the vocational education and training in Germany with regards to the dual VET system. We have about 50% of the population joining this system in their lifetime, so it is at the moment still the most popular training path and education path in Germany. Apart from that, we of course have a school-based vocational training, and we also of course have a university education. But we're looking at the VET system in Germany. We are often asked if we can send our system to another country, implement our vocational training system in our country. And that is basically not possible. A training system is, of course, something that is rooted in the society and the economy of a country. And instead, we have, in the last 10 years, roughly 15 years, worked on the question, what are the typical features that make the dual VET system in Germany popular? And we have come to identify 5 quality features of the VET system in Germany that you have to look at when you want to improve a vocational training system or design a vocational training system following the lines of Germany, so to say. These 5 success factors have been, in the meantime, found their way into several strategies of the German government, especially when it comes to international cooperation. And they are basically accepted by the major stakeholders in dual VET in Germany. Of course, you may develop other systems. There are some scientific articles claiming there are 10 quality features of VET. You can go into more detail. You can look at the micro and the macro level. But we have come to these 5 success factors of VET. First, the most important feature of our dual VET system is that the government and the business community, as well as the social partners, that is the employers and the trade unions, work together in this system. And I will give you some examples on how we do that basically on all levels of the vocational training system in Germany. The second quality feature is, of course, the learning within the work process. That's why it is called the dual system. We have 2 places, 2 venues of learning, and that is the company and in-company training and a school, a government school. The third quality feature is the acceptance of national standards. Even when you have a lot of stakeholders, it is important that they all follow the same standards to make it a system that allows mobility within your country and that gives people, for example, the same degree and the same vocational training standard wherever they learn in the country. We then have regulations regarding the VET staff. We see to it that only qualified VET staff train the young people. And finally, as a 5th factor, we have institutionalized research on VET. That is, we accompany, so to say, the VET system by gathering and analyzing information. And we have institutions that advise the different stakeholders in our VET system. I come now to the first quality feature, that is the cooperation of government, business community, and the social partners. We have given some authority that you would normally think is a typical government authority to the different stakeholders in the VET system. And we have developed systems and institutions where the stakeholders meet and work together. And the main stakeholders are, as I said already, the trade unions, on behalf, so to say, of the ones being trained, the employers and the employer organizations as the ones negotiating with the trade unions on the working and then also learning conditions. We have the chambers and the apex bodies, and we have the government to cooperate on all levels in several formalized settings. For example, if I look at the national level, we have at our institute, we have a main board where these organizations meet, that is the government. And when I say the government, I speak of, we have a federal government and the state governments, and they all join this board at our federal institute. And we have basically here we have the apex bodies of the employers and employees organizations and of the chambers. So that's done on a national level where micro decisions are being taken, where vocational training standards are being passed, to give you some examples what these organizations decide jointly. At the level of the states, the Länder in Germany, the states, we have VET committees as well with all these stakeholders. And on the district level, where vocational training is being implemented, we have, again, VET committees with representatives from the government, that is basically the teachers of the government schools, and from the business community, that is business people usually, and from the district level. And then finally, on a very micro level, the stakeholders already meet when an apprentice is being examined, when he has his final exam. And he will be examined by an examination board, which is set up by the chamber, but which again has representatives of employers and employees and the government. So I give you here an overview of the different organizations that that cooperate in our VET system. A big role is being played by the chamber organizations. As a background, I must tell you that in Germany, chambers are very, very strong because we have a compulsory membership in chambers. So every company is a member of its particular chamber. And the chambers can really access all companies. They have basically contact with all companies, and they really represent all the companies in Germany. So chamber organizations, the chambers have been given the status of the competent body in our dual VT system. That is the organization that is monitoring the correct implementation of the dual VT system on the district level is the chambers. That means that the apprentice and the company, once they join an apprenticeship contract, they have to register with the chamber and inform the chamber that an apprenticeship is taking place. So they register the contracts, they organize the examinations, this kind of thing. The chambers do that. Is our business organizations. So these are on the one things that are look a little bit like government tasks. On the other hand, the chambers support their companies in implementing dual VT. So they have like a dual role here, which is very good from the point of view of the companies, because it's easier for a company to deal with their own chamber, which they indirectly control, than dealing with a government official when it comes to training. I mentioned the social partners. These are mainly the labor unions and the employer organizations. They work together basically on negotiating the conditions for the apprentices in the companies, and they are part of the examination board. And then we have the government. The government is very important when it comes to the school part of our dual VET system. And it finances a lot of support systems in dual VET. Sharing responsibility also means that you share the burden, you share the financial burden. And in Germany, we have, I'll cut it short here. Of course, the employers, they employ the apprentices and they have to pay them a salary. And that is more than 25 billion euros in Germany gross expenses. And when you calculate, when you deduct the productive contribution of apprentices, that is still something like 7.7 billion euros contribution to the dual VT system. So the biggest financial contribution lies with the employers, who get trained apprentices in return, of course. And the government has a public expenditure for dual VT of about 4.75 billion euros. That is mainly the vocational schools and their staff and their running expenses. But this is also expenses for monitoring, steering the system. The second quality feature is that we have 2 coordinated learning venues, and that is very important to know. In Germany, in dual VET, the apprentice learns in the production process. So he is in a company, he works in a company, he knows or he learns how to handle customers, how to work with colleagues, how to work in a hierarchical structure of a company, and so forth. On average, about 70% of his time is spent in the company, but 30% of the time he will join a vocational school. And the training there is based on school laws, and this is like a regular school, so to say. 1/3 of the lessons there are even of a general kind, and 2/3 of a professional related kind. By the way, dual VT lasts between 2 and 3.5 years, depending on the profession that you have chosen. The third quality feature in dual VET is that we have training standards, that we have vocational training standards and school standards that fit into a particular profession. And these are coordinated between all the stakeholders. So when we have a vocational training standard in Germany, it is being developed, or when we need one, we develop it jointly. That is the business community, the trade unions, and the government, so to say, sit together and, for example, update an existing training standard or develop a completely new standard. At the moment, we have the issue of digitalization, so we have developed several new professions in the area of digitalization. For example, the logistics expert is a new profession. We have developed some new IT professions, and we have updated all 325 professions in our dual VT system by adding some aspects of digitalization to all of them. And these are things that are then standardized, and every company has to follow this particular standard, and the vocational schools will follow these standards as well and work out their curricula accordingly. So that is one quality feature. These standards are the same all over Germany. That means when you're being trained in the north or south of Germany, it does not matter. You can get a job in any other part of the country. Next quality feature is our VET personnel. Here you must see that we have two learning venues, and accordingly we have two different kind of training personnel. In vocational schools, we use teachers, and they undergo a normal teachers training at a university, at a pedagogical university. And we have at the moment about 42,000 full-time educators at vocational schools. So they undergo a very similar training to a teacher at a normal general school. And then we have training personnel within the companies. That is, we have trainers within the company. Normally, the direct teaching happens or is done by normal employees of the particular company who have learned the same profession as the apprentice before. But every company must also employ one person who has undergone.
Peter, sorry.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you think you can, reduce? I mean, because there is some time constraint. Yeah.
Like that.
Some time constraint. So.
Okay. Yeah, I'm done soon. Yeah.
Yeah.
So for this personnel, we also have a training of trainers course, which gives us the next quality feature. Then finally, we also research and analyze our system. So there's our Federal Institute, which collects the data to advise the government on the necessary actions, on the developments in our vocation training system. And at the same time, we have a lot of organizations that advise the existing stakeholders. So these were the 5 quality features in our dual VT training. And as a final word for those of you who ask, well, there's quality features, but is there a quality management system? I would just like to give one outlook. As the system in dual VT in Germany has grown, there is no quality system for the whole dual VT system. There's no quality management. Rather, this has grown over the years, but we have put together, and all European states, most European states have done that at the moment. We have put together quality points, contact points all over Europe, and they inform about how to guarantee the quality, for example, also in practice. And this link that you see in this presentation will lead you to that to give you more detailed information on how to establish quality in a practical vocational training setting. So thank you very much.
Many thanks, Peter, for your wonderful presentation. We have heard much about VET system, but it's for the first time. I mean, at least in my case, I hear more about the specific features that you are serious about in order to make it a big success. So the 5 features that you have explained would obviously require or would invite discussions. And I'm sure that you'll have a whole lot of questions coming up in the chat box. You may answer those questions at a later stage. But now I'm going to invite the next speaker, who is Ms. Suki Dasgupta from ILO. Suki is the chief of ILO's Employment and Labor Market Policies branch. And she was working in various countries also. She holds a PhD in economics from the University of Cambridge, published widely in the area.
Hello. Should I start speaking? Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're okay. You're okay, Shukti. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So thanks a lot to the chair and thanks to the organizers for inviting the ILO to this meeting. It's my great pleasure to be here today. So I will be speaking about the COVID-19 crisis and the impact on the world of work, particularly in the context of jobs and skills, linking to the past trends, the future of work drivers, and what's really happening and what is, the implications for the way forward. So I will not really be going into good case examples, but you will be listening to two of my other colleagues who are much better placed to share with you global good practices in terms of skill systems and new developments. And also it was very good to listen to the two speakers before me from Korea and from Germany about their experiences. So in terms of the COVID-19 crisis, as was mentioned by Professor Stiglitz yesterday and the two honorable ministers today and the other presenters.
Shukti, could you go into full screen? Shukti, could you go into full screen, please? Full screen.
Yes, is that better? Sorry. So there, it has had an unprecedented impact on labor markets, and the ILO has been following the labor market impact with regular monitors. And the last one actually came out about 10 days ago, where we saw that in the whole of 2020, relative to the last quarter of 2019, about 255 million full-time jobs were lost. So it's a huge impact. And what's also important to note is that, this crisis, the impact of this crisis on the labor market is about 4 times bigger than that during the 2009 crisis. And you see the figure on the right, the world economy had not really recovered from the 2009 crisis when this one happened. And therefore, we have seen a huge rise in unemployment. I won't go into the figures, you can see them here. But what is also really of great concern is that inactivity has grown and labor force participation rates overall have declined, as well as the global incomes have gone down. Now, to represent this in the flow chart, you can see that the working hour losses that the ILO calculated led to employment loss, as well as working hour reduction, which is loss in incomes. But the shift to inactivity, which is 81 million, has been huge. And this is particularly important for policymakers when you're talking about skills development, especially for young people, how to get this huge group of young people back into the labor market. And one more point I would like to make here is that we purposely decided to focus on working hour losses rather than unemployment as a main indicator, because, in developing countries, unemployment is not always the best indicator of labor market distress. And the figures coming from India or from the South Asian region actually also are in line. And in fact, the South Asian region had one of the largest declines in working hour losses, and that's partly because of what happened in India, because the South Asian story is of course influenced by the large country like India and the very strict lockdown we had here. Now, if you look at the figures that are coming from actual labor force survey data, the quarterly surveys, because the previous ILO figures were all estimates. Now, the actual labor force survey data from a few countries that we have show us very similar picture. But what is really of concern, and we need to take notice, is that there were certain groups who were hit far more than others, which also has very strong policy implications. And these are, of course, young people. They were the most badly hit, the self-employed, the women relative to men, a point that was already made by the Honorable Minister, and of course, the low-skilled relative to the medium and high-skilled. And therefore, this ambition of skilling the workforce for future crises is also very important. Now, if you look at the data from the CMI in India, it bears out a similar narrative. Young people, so many of them lost their jobs between April and June. And in a recent paper, Ashwini Deshpande also shows that women were far more likely to lose jobs than men. So in fact, what this crisis has done is really, accentuated the skill divides, the gender divides, the digital divides, the access to digital infrastructure. And in fact, Oxfam recently came out with a report, again about, I think, 7 days ago. And they call it, the title of the report is The Inequality Virus, to capture the huge impact that this pandemic has had on inequality. Not only job losses, but for many people in the informal economy, it's also been a loss of basic needs like food, accommodation. Many SMEs closed down, and as per an ILO survey, about 38% of MSMEs worldwide had to close down during the pandemic, disrupted education, training. For young people entering the labor market, there is this, the very difficult transitions, but also a lot of mental stress. We did a global survey on youth, and it was really one of the major findings that there's a huge mental stress, especially amongst youth during the course of this pandemic. And a point that was already made, increased burden of unpaid care by women during this work from home model. We saw women having to bear the work as well as the unpaid care burden. But also interestingly, some figures, especially those coming out of India, some analysis that has already been done, show that men's share of care work also increased, but of course to a much lesser extent. And also some men, in spite of the pandemic work from home situation, did not put in more hours of work in unpaid care. So the question really is whether this trend, if we call it a trend towards gender equality, is going to be something that will last beyond the pandemic. It's something we have to wait and see. And also women are more represented in the health and care industry, and therefore they were more vulnerable to the pandemic itself. And sometimes the choice was between unemployment and risky jobs such as Anganwadi workers in India. Now, I would like to pause here and look at the scenario pre-COVID. It's not as if pre-COVID, the labor markets were doing very well. And I would like to highlight 3 issues here, which all have very strong policy implications. First and foremost, there was a decline in what we call employment elasticity of growth. So less employment per unit of output, the first figure. Secondly, there was a rise in productivity, especially in the Chinas and many of the middle-income countries, including in India. But the productivity growth was not being shared equally. So there has been a decline, a global decline in labor share, even in countries where real wages have been growing. So this has implications for distribution. And thirdly, informal employment persists. But interestingly, some recent analysis we did shows that there is a shift from wage employment, from unpaid family work towards wage employment amongst youth, which is positive. But if you really go into depth, you'll find that most of it is temporary, informal, casual. So this shift towards wage work is really towards insecure forms of wage work. Now, all this is further compounded by the fact that we already had the future of work issues causing some shifts in the labor market. And here, let me highlight 3 issues: technology, demography, and environmental sustainability. We know all, at least for technology, there are jobs lost and jobs created, but the question remains how you govern new forms of work that are coming out of this technological revolution, the 4th industrial revolution. and the very big rise in gig work, and India remains one of the biggest suppliers of gig work globally. And COVID, we all know, has really accelerated the move towards digitalization. Now, secondly, there is aging, and it has impacts for social security for older workers, but also for youth employment, and COVID has impacted both negatively. And thirdly, when it comes to environmental sustainability, the narrative is slightly different because we have to go towards more environmentally sustainable modes of production, and that will have both positive and negative effects on jobs. But COVID provides an opportunity to revamp production systems in this manner. Going into a bit more detail, now new technology is certainly changing the skill needs, and I'm sure my colleague Srinivas Reddy will speak more to that. And what we find interestingly is that there is a decline in demand for middle skill workers. And this is particularly important because a huge bulk of young people entering the labor force actually have middle skill, are at the middle skill level. So it requires rethinking. And there is also a growth in adoption of robots in manufacturing. Now, it's not going to replace labor immediately, but it does have implications for new kinds of skills which are more in tune with the new technology. Secondly, in terms of aging, you can see that there is a clear trend towards aging, even in less developed countries which have not yet become rich. So there's a huge social security story here, but there is also a story or a narrative about lifelong learning, which has implications for skill system. And again, I'm sure my colleagues will speak more to it. And there is a movement we see today from what we call a three-stage model, that is education, work, retirement, towards what is a multi-stage model as people live longer and they move in and out of jobs. The labor market is changing, and from retirement back to work, etc. So it's a very different model, and it requires a different way of thinking in terms of skills development systems as well. But on the other hand, perhaps this trend towards aging and also the COVID crisis has shown us that there is going to be need for more jobs in the care sector. And Kerala, we already know, has always been very, leading in this. In fact, the ILO estimates there could be 269 million new jobs in the care economy in a high road scenario. The question, of course, is how do you ensure these jobs are decent and that there are the necessary skills required and the gender issues are addressed. In terms of job potential in the green economy, we did a report in 2018, and clearly the net job creation is going to be positive, even though there will be some jobs lost in the circular economy, in the renewable energy economy, etc. The details are here. I won't go into all of them, but to underline the point that to have a just transition, as the ILO says, there will need to be investment in skills. There will have to be investment in strong institutions and investment in the right kind of jobs for that particular local economy. Just to give you an example from some research we did a little while ago, in terms of the circular economy scenario, there are clearly job creation potential, 78 million, but also job losses. Now, some of those job losses will have to be reallocated, will require new training. Some can be absorbed, but essentially what is extremely important here that there is a huge need for reskilling, upskilling to reallocate within same occupations in the growing industries. And I'm not sure you can see the little figure on the right, but there are very strong gender implications of these kind of shifts. So the policies will need to be really gender sensitive. Now, in terms of all the shifts that are happening, it's also interesting to see what today's young people are thinking about the future. And normally what you find is that subsequent generations always think that they will have better opportunities than the previous generation. But today's generation Z, young people of today, seem to have the perception that they will have less fulfilling career options than their grandparents. This is based on some research done by the Pew Center, but the ILO also did a number of surveys which bring out similar narratives. The question, of course, here is technological anxiety playing a role, and clearly, one can say so. But of course, in terms of technology, it's not only a question of losing jobs, but also jobs being created. There'll be complementarity effects, there'll be substitution effects, and ultimately what technology will adopt will depend on relative prices. But my feeling is that there is also a very strong skills issue here. And perhaps, the question is, if you have a certain kind of skill, you might be more optimistic about the future or not. So just, to kind of bring all this together, it's clear that COVID has aggravated past challenges. And it has kind of, exposed more the fault lines we already had in the development models. But as we go forward, what we call building back better or building back fairer, there are huge implications for skills. And from a medium-term perspective, the initial conditions, the initial financial situation, governance issue, labor market institutions, employment policies or skills institutions will matter hugely. And what will, another thing that COVID has really exposed is the state, the role of the state, and whether or not there is trust in the state, strong state, good labor market institutions, these are critical. Obviously, for many less developed countries, this is going to be a challenge. But on the other hand, for countries like India, which are huge, which have diverse development patterns across the country, states which have a very strong, social justice, commitment to social justice, social dialogue, public welfare institutions, such as Kerala, may be relatively better off in terms of responding to the challenges, both the health crisis as well as rebuilding economies. And there is, as has already been pointed out by the ministers earlier, this challenge also offers a huge opportunity to reset investment and skills for jobs for the future. And here especially needs to, there is a need to focus perhaps on the digital economy, which will definitely create jobs, the care economy to make sure these are decent jobs, the green economy, but the gender issues are going to be critical in all this transition. At the same time, looking at skills cannot be in isolation. It has to be as part of an overall package. And the ILO talks about 5 pillars for a global human-centered recovery. That is maintaining accommodative macroeconomic policy. Secondly, there has to be global solidarity in terms of how you look at debt, etc. The hard-hit groups will have to be focused on, especially women, young people, reskilling, upskilling opportunities, balancing the needs of diverging sectors, because some sectors have really suffered while some sectors are growing rapidly, such as the digital sector. And ultimately implementing all of this through a system of social dialogue and towards a commitment to social justice to ensure that it is more inclusive and that the recovery is fairer and better. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Sukhi Dasgupta. You have made wonderful observations, both pre-COVID and COVID times situation you have explained in detail. I'm particularly interested in some of the critical points that you raised. I mean, the choice between unemployment and risky jobs, or the decline in wage share in labor productivity, and also the question of middle skills and the average age of the labor force and like that. So by and large, it's a gendered perspective, but it's very, very interesting. And I'm 100% sure that you will have a whole lot of questions. So please check the chat box as well. And otherwise, I will try to get you those questions. Now, as you mentioned, your colleague Bodado, Gabriel Bodado, would talk about the lifelong learning. That's his specialized area. And Bodado is also from ILO country office, now in Delhi. He has done a whole lot of work on TWET system, popularizing TWET system in various countries. He was also an executive director of Competency Assessment and Certification Office, Philippines. He played a critical role in reforming, that's very important, reforming the TWET system Over to you, Bordado, please. Bordado, please.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I'm muted. Yeah, thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity. We're three here from ILO. I will be presenting on some good practices in terms of ILO interventions towards lifelong learning, which was initially highlighted by my colleague Sukti in his earlier presentation. I would not dwell on these trends because it was already presented by Sukti, but let me just highlight the second and the third bullet where India is heavily impacted. I mean, in terms of exodus of returning migrant workers, and currently in COVID scenario, it's really big. Like there was a statistics that there are 4 crores of migrant workers domestically or within India, and around 7.5 lakh of which have returned to their state of origin. So that really don't include the migrant workers returning from other countries. On the other hand, the climate change also has impacted. Kerala has been affected of flood in 2019 as well as in 2020. Really looking at also Bangladesh flood was there in last year also, that really has due to the climate change. That statistics or data presented by Sukti has really impacted that South Asian Tibet sector, which really looks at we need to strengthen the Tibet governance system, really looking at highlighting the role of the private sector, the workers group in terms of governance, the donor agencies really have to look at in terms of these governance systems. We're really looking at implementation of the sectoral approach to skills development, meaning we try to look at interventions at the economic sector. Sukti has highlighted 2 new sectors that will emanate from from the future of work that was presented in 2019. Really looks at the care economy or care industry. India is really looking at it because there's a big sector of informalities in the care economy. We're trying to look at how do we make sure to formalize the qualification in the care work to really contribute to the GDP of India in terms of the care economy, and also the participation of women, because most of the care workers in India are really women. Now, we also need to expand the recognition and validation of skills and competencies. This really focuses on now the scenario is you don't need to go to a formal education and training system. You can validate the experience, the work experience, the competences you gain both at the work and both gain informally. So we need to really look at that. And also need to develop more flexible learning system. This now was highlighted due to the COVID pandemic that really looks at an alternative delivery system in terms compared to the existing of face-to-face. So these are the implications for South Asia's Tibet sector. And what needs to be done really in terms of the Tibet sector? There is a need to include the foundational skills in the childhood and basic education, because most of the findings of ILO really looks at there is really some sort of a gap, even if there are available training programs or skills development interventions. The issue is really having most of the target beneficiaries that really don't have the foundational skills like learning to learn, adaptivity, teamwork, and innovation. The other point that needs to be done is really skills anticipation. This is a must. I think with the widening skills mismatch, we really need to have an analysis and enhance social dialogue to identify the current and the future skills needs. India is into it. I will discuss that in the good practice for India and really what is India currently doing on skills anticipation. Then using the technology to promote flexible learning option. This is something to do with using the digital solutions in terms of acquiring skills and competencies. And lastly, is the active labor market policies like career guidance, counseling, and support services have to play a major role in facilitating people's transition from school to work or from work to work due to digitalization, automation, or aging population. Just to really look at what ILO is doing in terms of skills development. Basically, we have three target customers or beneficiaries. One are the new entrants looking for employment. If you look at that, it has at least 4 subcategories. These are the lack of skills, which I've mentioned earlier, that there are high percentage of those who really don't have the foundational skills, the core skills, and entrepreneurial skills. The policy intervention there would really focus on second chance education, those lacking basic skills, inclusion of the entry program in the formal education, strengthening the employability skills, expansion of the employment service centers and on-the-job trainings, as well as the mandatory skill certification. The other subcomponent of this target customer is really looking at, there are people who are competent, who have the skills, but there are no employment demand. So this is a scenario of we have skilled workers, but there are no opportunities, or there are no information on where the jobs are here. But basically, the policy here is really providing wage or training subsidy to the industry, which we have been doing in other regions. The labor-intensive public works, Afghanistan, and even India has that, the Roads to Job project. Then the mandatory skill certification, subsidy to employers for hiring certified workers. So these are the policy intervention there. The third subcomponent of this one target market or customer is really the disadvantaged group not having access to intervention. These are the women, persons with disabilities, and really we have to come up with a design to fit excluded group requirements, provide incentives to employers and training providers for those who have hired or have get participants from this disadvantaged group. And the part of which is the lack of financing mechanism for would-be entrepreneurs, like probably implement comprehensive entrepreneurship program and microfinancing. The second and third customer really looks at existing worker in the informal economy and classified also as workers affected by the technology, meaning the automation, the obsolescence of work, and the aging workers. Although India is still not at this level, most of the developed countries have really reached this stage of having an aging workers in the economy. And the third one is really looking at the informal sector. Our interventions really focus on establishment of a system for workers to skill reskill, and upskill. Then the next intervention here will really provide work transition support system. And the third one is strengthening the recognition of prior learning for lifelong learnings of workers, giving incentives to the employers for hiring certified workers. Now, let me go straight to the current works that we are looking at that framework, or based on that framework on skills development interventions. In Bangladesh, you know, the history of Bangladesh, really, it has a lot of a big portfolio of skills development projects. ILO has been managing big projects since 2008 from the EU, then the Canadian. Now we are having an ongoing project with an EU-funded project on skills also, and there's a forthcoming one for the gendering. They say engendering, or having make the women have access to skills, and this forthcoming project is funded by the Canadian government. So if you look at the reform system in Bangladesh, ILO is really providing assistance and capacity building programs to enhance the coordination of skills development through the sector-wide approach. This really looks at sequencing, organizing interventions, and prioritizing it towards what are the goals and objectives of Bangladesh in terms of education and training. So we are trying to, now we are initially providing capacity development to the technical and Maharashtra education department to really pilot this sector-wide approach in terms of skills development intervention, or coordination of skills development interventions. Now we have the expansion of the flexible skills delivery system through eCampus. We have set up an eCampus in one of the polytechnics in Bangladesh, and this can really assist other TTCs, Technology and Training Center, and other polytechnics to implement a blended program on, when we talk of blended, these are online program and combination also of a face-to-face, because there are some qualifications that really needs a face-to-face delivery. So this, we wanted to expand to other regions in Bangladesh. Now we are doing also the formal recognition of qualification of returning migrant workers. Other than India, Bangladesh is also experiencing the influx of returning migrant workers. One of the good interventions there that is really first level of intervention is to really give a formal qualification of what they have gained, what are their experience outside Bangladesh. And we are doing this in collaboration with the Bangladesh Technical Education Board, which is the certifying body of Bangladesh, and the Ministry of Expats, which really handles or take care of the migrant workers. In the case of Sri Lanka, it's really also focused on the returning migrant workers. The success indicator of this intervention, which was being when ILO collaborating with these three, we call as the social partners, the employers group, the workers group, and the government. Now we include the training institutions that really looks at, let's sit down, work together, and what are our intervention in terms of the needs of the returning migrant workers. And that, one of the key highlight of that intervention is what we call as the skills passport. RPL is now common even in India, in other countries, except for Afghanistan, we're still in transition. But the skills passport, the smart card skills passport is one of the innovative interventions or innovative activity of this collaboration. Basically,
Gabriel,
just factor
sorry,
that employers.
Gabriel,
Yes, sir.
sorry for interruption. Do you think you could summarize?
Yeah, I can summarize this in. I just have one slide more. So basically, the skills passport has been recognized by the employers. That's why we're trying to implement, if we can expand that to other countries. Now, I will not go into the details of the other, but let me just go through the India intervention. One highlight here is really looking at what we are working with the NCBET, the new certifying body of India and MSD on the credit transfer. Meaning, if I have one program on short term, what's the transfer? What's the credit if I move to long duration skills development until you go to the formal education? And the other one that we are working with here is the modernizing the apprenticeship program. India is one of the 4 countries of the global project on research on how to modernize apprenticeship, and this is being managed by our headquarters with our colleague, our director, Srinivas Reddy, as the point office there. We're trying to look at what is the policy recommendations based on the experience of India and present it to the global forum in terms of having a global recommendation. One last slide here is, if you look at the models that we are looking for Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and India, we are now in the process of developing a regional skills qualification framework for South Asia, which really looks at an avenue to link the various mobility and lifelong learning strategies of the countries. The others are basically really looking at how to finance NQF, how do we have a regional identity in terms of having a world-class or world-class regional workers from the South Asia. Over. Thank you very much, sir.
Thanks, Gabriel. Wonderful, excellent presentation. I mean, you have begun your presentation with the classic question: what needs to be done? That's the primary question that we need to ask, and you have raised that question. You have narrated the experiences of various countries with a focus on Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and India. That's interesting. And the idea that you have mooted, the regional framework for South Asia, that would be very interesting, particularly when we find that there is an increasing south-south migration taking place in the world. So in every sense, I think we will have so many takeaways from your presentation that we will discuss later. And I'm sure that you will have a lot of questions. So please look at that chat box as well. And I would now invite Mr. Atul Kumar Tiwari, IAS. I mean, he is the person who looks after the kind of work that we do in India. He's the chief of what is called this Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship. So he has been very active in promoting skills, education, and training programs in India with the help of other agencies. And I'm sure that Mr. Atul will have a whole lot of things to say to us. So over to you, Atul.
Good afternoon to Professor Ramchandra and Professor K. Ravi Raman sir. I was going through the concept note for the whole conference, and I would say that it has written very, very clear. And you have noted down that the Kerala is known for its power of public action and it is can you hear me?
Hello. Yes.
Yes, sir. We can. Yes, indeed.
So, Professor, I would say that the concept note is very well made and very limpid, clear. And I applaud you for noting the Kerala's example of power of public action and its role in the human development, which is why Kerala is where it is. The background note is also very succinct, and you have made certain points on which I will refer to at the end of my discussion. Before I go for the presentation, I would just like to give a brief overview of the skilling. Some people are still talking, so maybe is it because of me? No. Hello. Can you
please mute? Please mute. Those who are not speaking, please mute your mic.
Can you go to the second slide, please? Whoever is changing, I am not changing the slides. So, yeah.
Next slide, please.
Next slide. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. The Ministry of Skill Development, sir, is to coordinate the skill development across the country, and we have written that we remove the discontent between demand and supply, and build the vocational and technical training framework, skill upgradation, etc., etc. And we also had a national policy on skill development and entrepreneurship. The point I'm trying to make here is that the MSD provides support for the training, which is on the short-term training, which we call Prime Minister Kaushal Vikas Yojana. We have the long-term training, which is through the ITIs. Next slide, please. We also have apprenticeship trainings, and we have supported by the organizations like National Skill Development Corporation and NCVT, on which there was a small reference during the earlier presentation. Next, please. So any skilling ecosystem depends upon two primary things. One is that how it is linked to the modern education system, whether there is a premium on the vocationalization or not. We find in India, unfortunately, for various reasons, that the skilling vocationalization is not on very high on the aspirational scale. That's one issue. Second thing is also the skilling requirement is also driven by the economic development. So assuming that both the things work together, it is for us to provide the skilling, what are the job requirement, what are the qualification norms, what are the funding requirements, how do we can do it, and how long the training would be there. These are the things in which MSD is engaged with. To tell you very briefly, we can start the presentation right here. Let me explain the other things. One is that in the new national education policy, there has been a bigger emphasis on vocationalization of formal education. And the UGC has also brought something called embedded degree courses, degree courses embedded with apprenticeship and internships. The NCVT is also working on the credit transfer mechanism. So the primary thing which I said, sir, earlier was that there has to be aspiration attached to the vocationalization, which means that I have a training, it leads to the further training, my career pathways are clear, and then I also have an academic qualification to go with it. And on that basis, I do my reskilling and upskilling later. So this pathway has to be very, very clear. On this, we are working with the NCVT on the credit transfer mechanism. We are also working with the Department of Higher Education on how to increase the vocationalization of education. On the apprenticeship front, we have the one scheme is there. On the small training front, short training front, we have Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana, on which we are giving a bigger emphasis on this time to the empowerment and say decentralization and involvement of the state governments and the district skilling committees. On the qualification side, sir, that we want, there is a common cost norms are there, qualification packs are there. We are working with the sector skill councils who also act as an input from the business and industry side. They tell us what kind of qualifications are required in which job works and what should be the duration of the training, what should be taught and what should be assessed. So this is also one point which we are looking after. And we, other than that, sir, under the Director General of Training, we have thousands of ITIs, private and government, spread all over India. Some of them are in Kerala as well. And under Sankalp scheme, which is a World Bank aided. We are taking a long-term view of the improvement of the ITIs, increase of the job courses, taking the new age skilling as well. And in that way, we are trying to do the capacity building of the district skilling committees. So in what we are trying to suggest here is, sir, that we are not looking at skilling as a primary, you train certain people, put them to the job market, it goes. No, sir. What we are trying to see is to a whole well-rounded approach, a robust kind of a pathway, so that while we are taking care of the education system, we are also taking care of the needs of the industry and the businesses. And we fill in whether it is a fee-based model or grant-based model or apprenticeship-based model, where we can give this kind of skillings. So with that, I will very quickly go on my presentation, in which I have highlighted there are certain things which we are doing. There was one question which was said about in the concept note, was about the making the skill and the labor market linked together. I will show you that we have a portal called ASEEM, in which we are doing a lot of bringing the skill and the employer together as well, as you should see in my next slides. We are also working on the new age skills that also will show you, sir. And primarily, I would say that what is that we can learn even from Kerala? Kerala should be proud of the fact that there are so many new initiatives which are happening in Kerala also. And as it is, I'm from Karnataka cadre, next to Kerala, and I always have a belief that many state governments, they do much better and on a localized setup, and the central government can learn quite a lot from them. So there is certain things which Kerala can also teach us, which we can replicate elsewhere in our large country. With that brief introduction, sir, I would like to take you to my presentation. On this slide, we are trying to show that what is the schematic implementation under the MSD, which is the Empowering Employability National Apprenticeship Promotion Scheme is there. Vocationalization of school education, as I already talked about. And we have the STT stands for the short-term trainings, recognition of private learning is RPL, and the special projects. Next, please. We are also doing a lot of capacity building of the states. As you can see here, the ministry works through the NSDC. We provide the state's technical assistance, and we have the state engagement officer. There's a state level skill development mission is there. And as Chairman was saying in his opening remark, Honorable Minister was saying about the CAS, we are also very happy that the Kerala Academy for Skill Excellence is doing quite a lot of works. But Kerala is in a unique opportunity also. You get a lot of migrants as well. Your human development index is very high, and your requirement skills are also pretty high. So I here acknowledge the work done by the CAS. Next, please. If you can very briefly say about because the friends from ILO and other reputed agencies are there, so I can little bit blow my trumpet as well. The PMKVY, it says that we have done a study, finds that they are 1.8 times more likely to get employed. They get 15% higher average monthly income. And the increase is more in the case of the recognition of prior learning. So when we did the perception of the benefits of recognition of prior learning in current employment, which we found that 75% are more prepared for current employment, and they have a more confidence in getting a better job. So in that way, we are linking the old tradition of Guru Shishya Parampara with our recognition of prior learning, which certainly with checks and balances, and so that it is not trivialized beyond a point. And that way also we are giving a lot of confidence to the existing home-based, tutor-based kind of skilling, which otherwise doesn't figure in our lexicon. Next, please. We also have a Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Kendra, sir, and it is there in so many states. We have 738 have been established all over India. 19 are there in Kerala. And there are certain states which we need to do more. Of course, India is a large country, so we are working so that every state, every district, and every parliamentary constituency does have a Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Kendras, which are very well designed and very up-to-date, modern, state-of-the-art training centers, which can be utilized by the state governments as well for their training needs. Yes, please. As you're talking about in your notes, sir, as I was mentioning, let me find it out. There you had mentioned that there is a need to bring the labor and work together. And in that context, I would like to say that in the note it is mentioned that labor market information system, the current GeoCase state job portal is limited in its scope and reach and hence effectiveness. So here I would like to submit that the integrated skill management information system which we have, next slide please, it brings the employers and candidates to a dashboard together. Although it is a small one, I'm eager and I will be very happy to come to assistance of the Kerala government on this, how we can onboard and we can take more advantage of this dashboard. As you can see in the down below, there's a sector-wise, job role-wise, gender-wise in demand dashboard for Kerala. So what we do here is that it's not that everybody is putting their skill set on the dashboard. We do a little amount of curation. And because it is curated, free of course, that's why the employers find a great use of that. So this figure keeps on increasing. Now this figure must have increased further. So what I'm trying to suggest that it's a dashboard which is very, very useful to bring employers' skills and their employability together. So the state government can take more advantage of that, or rather we will be enriched if the state government of Kerala also makes use of it. Next, please. If we say just, since we're talking about Kerala, sir, that Kerala has a relatively higher availability of skilled persons, and among clusters in Kerala, southern cluster has relatively high availability of skilled persons, and southern clusters ranks second among 88 clusters in India with respect to skill index. So as we're talking about the Kerala's experiment of public action, that is where it shows. Next, please. The top sectors in Kerala, as per our information, is the transport and logistics, rubber, chemical and petrochemicals, hydrocarbons, ITs, construction, and the top districts are Ernakulam, Thiruvananthapuram, and Kollam and Kannur, etc. We can give a full district-wise, sector-wise breakup for Kerala if we are asked to. Next, please. Since we're talking about the modern skilling, we thought with some few slides on future skills will be required. So the World Economic Forum says that 30% of skills demanded globally will change in 2020, and there will be a 42% shift in the required skills. Then future work research done by the NSDC ourselves, we have found that the automation probability will lead to so much down 2.1% decline in the placement rates. And the jobs that require human interaction, for example, the care worker or something like that, on which Kerala is famous as it is, there will be demand will be quite constant because the future work is a future of care. There are certain things which the robots will not be able to do it. And we also found that after 8 months on the job, soft skill training program in our PMKVY also we give one comment is called EEE, entrepreneurship, English and employability. So by that, the students or the trainees are also empowered to work in the business or industry environment much better. And as you can see, the future skills which have been identified by the sector skill councils in partnership with NSDCs, IT, NASCOM, they have found so much. The electronics have found so much power, etc. For example, electrical vehicle is going to grow quite a lot in the coming years. So also would be the geospatial mapping and other stuff also. So what I'm trying to suggest that we have mapped the future skill requirements and we are working on that with the sector skill councils. Next, please. See, this is again the Future Skills Prime, which is a digital skilling platform brought by the Sister Ministry, Ministry of IT and Telecom, MIT. And this also can be made use of by developing the digital fluency. Next, please. There is also e-skilling India, in which all the e-content is provided. Next, please. Hello. On regarding international workforce mobility, sir, I admit that we need to do still more, and but we have done the India International Work Skill Centers networks are available, and out of which Kerala has around 15 network organizations. There are 36 in ISCs and 19 sectors and 12 districts are in Kerala. They are involved in the international worker mobility initiatives. Next, please. Please forgive me. Hello, I am busy. Can you call me later? There is also something called Swades, in which the Operation Vande Mataram, many people turn to India. So there also we have done some amount of mapping. And in Kerala, we have some data. It can be certainly be useful in linking them with the employability. Next, please. Then Ministry of External Affairs have this Pravasi Kausal Vikasa Yojana, in which the PDOT is being given to the Indian migrants before they leave India. So, so far we have one center in Cochin, which is imparting PDOT to immigrants. And certainly there is another is coming in Thiruvananthapuram as well. Next, please. There is a Japan also, there is a lot of opportunities opening up. Just recently, Union Cabinet cleared one scheme on the specified skilled workers. And the good part is that these workers can go as a salaried employee with the higher wages rather than the interns in Japan. And we are also working on a scheme whereby we can give further incentives for the people so that they can choose Japan as a destination for their employers. Next, please. We also have an engagement in Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And there we are working with the Takamol. And in the first phase, electrician, electrical, automotive, plumber, mechanical, automotive, HVAC. So these are the skill verification programs. We are going to work with them. There's already pilot work is going on, and we will complete it by February. And they're all, one center is also there in Kochi. Next, please.
So Tiwari, is that okay if you could summarize?
I'm just summarizing, just 2-3 slides more. So, and this is United Arab Emirates. That is what we are working with them to skill qualification benchmarks. I'm saying these things because it is of much interest to Kerala, sir, because of their huge Gulf population. Next, please. And we are also working with the Australia and Germany and other countries also, which we need to go further forward. Next, please. Just about the good best practices, the Kerala has this Muthoot FinCorp Limited, one PMKY special project is there, where they are giving training, skilling to loan processing officer, and they are also giving a different salary slabs. So this is also worth noting. Next, please. In the TUB Rhineland NIF Academy Private Limited, it is also, they have training centers across India. They provide theoretical training as well. So they are out of 12, they are in 12 districts of Kerala, and Kochi is the common location. Next. Center of Excellence is an excellent thing which is funded by the government of Kerala, in which the land and building has been given. They are used by the training providers, and then earlier it used to be rental, now it is revenue share, and these are the trainings which have been being set up, and this is working in so many places. Next, please. Similarly, community skill park also, and the square feet area is provided to TP operating, and they manage the facilities and training. And the student fee pay model is also being used. These are the areas on which we should take it, this example all across the other states as well. Next, please. Thank you very much, sir. For a little short of, I exceeded my time. Please forgive me for that. But I thought that Kerala being an interesting state, there were so many interesting things to say about Kerala. And I applaud the Kerala State Planning Board for taking this initiative. And by that way, I also like to thank my very dear friend, Dr. Venu also, who is the secretary of the board and the chairman. Thank you so much, sir.
Many thanks, Mr. Tiwari, for your excellent presentation. It's very insightful presentation, in fact. I mean, also thanks for acknowledging Kerala for the kind of progress we have made in various sectors. We would obviously be interested in advancing the kind of international cooperation that you have initiated with countries like Germany, Japan, and Australia. And we are also would be interested to know more about the kind of models that you want to develop. I mean, fee-based model, grant-based model, apprenticeship model. But you have already mentioned that it depends on the kind of linking that would be possible. That is the linking between education and the business classes, business groups, and also the kind of links between skills and labor market. And apart from that, the capacity building of states is also a fundamental question that we need to discuss in this context of acquiring new age skills. Thank you so much. And I'm sure that already a few questions have come up in the chat box. And now I will go to Mr. Srinivas B. Reddy from ILO headquarters. He is the Chief Skills and Employability Branch, Employment Policy Department. And he has got a whole lot of experience in various countries, particularly in Bangladesh. And then is a known expert in this field of skills and employability. I'm sure that Mr. Reddy will have a whole lot of things to say about what is called the skilling of the youth, particularly the skilling of the youth. Thank you so much, Srinivas. Over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Raman. Thank you for giving me this opportunity, and thank you for inviting us. From the ILO, three of us, we have seen quite a lot already, and a number of issues have already been very well covered, and it was great to see the excellent presentation from Government of India. The Additional Secretary covered a number of activities. What I would like to do is to raise some of the global perspectives and some key developments at the global arena on skills and lifelong learning, and complement what already colleagues have raised. I would like to see that I would not repeat what has already been said. As my colleague Sukti Das Gupta has shown the major trends that we are seeing today in the world as a consequence of COVID pandemic, but also different global mega drivers. The key issue from my point of view is of course, first of all, the job creation itself. Availability of jobs is the most important and fundamental thing. Then we are seeing a huge mismatch in skills and aspirations. So the skills mismatch and aspirations mismatch. A lot of employers complain that they do not get the right set of skills from the people for the jobs that they offer. And a lot of people with the degrees and qualifications and certificates, they find it difficult to access the jobs. So why is the skills mismatch and aspirations mismatch is happening, and what can we do? So I would raise some few issues, mainly from a public policy point of view. What can be done to overcome this? The ILO has celebrated the 100 years of its history last year. I hope a lot of you have participated. And the ILO's Global Commission on the Future of Work dealt with these issues at great length, looking at what will the jobs of the future look like, and therefore, how to really equip ourselves. It made three major recommendations in three major clusters. And the first cluster, as you can see, is investing in people capabilities. That is one of the important recommendations from the Global Commission. In addition to investing in institutions of work, and the third dimension, which is very important, Sukti has repeatedly emphasized, the need to invest in job creation itself. First of all, there should be jobs to be able to really work. So these are the three major recommendations. So my talk will, look into some different aspects of the first recommendation. What do we mean by investing in people capabilities? What is the issue of lifelong skills and lifelong learning is all about? Sukti has also, just to refresh our memory, the Future of Work Commission has looked at the changing world of work from these new economies that are emerging, digital economy, green economy, care economy, but also highlighted the continued importance of rural economy in many parts of the world. So we should not underestimate that rural economy continues to offer high amount of jobs in many parts of the world. So in addition to all the ongoing sectors of economy, some of the new dimensions that one needs to look into. All of this culminated in the centenary declaration ILO issued last year, which again emphasized the need for promoting skills, competencies, and qualifications for all throughout the working lives as a joint responsibility. Each of these words have very important, significant meaning and implication, and therefore recommended effective lifelong learning and quality education for all. In this background, we also have, as you're all aware, ILO has international labor standards, and on the skills and lifelong learning and the human resource development, one important standard that I would like to refer to is ILO HRD recommendation 195. The recommendation says that the skills and lifelong learning should be an integral part of comprehensive economic, fiscal, social, and labor market policies. This is a very important message in my view for sustainable economic growth and employment creation and social development, all the three elements. Now, environmental dimension, it's economic dimension, social dimension, and environmental dimension. Skills and lifelong learning to be seen as an integral part of comprehensive policies. Often, skills mismatch is a result of different worlds not meeting together. The world of education and the world of work often find it difficult to, talk to each other, work together, and plan together and execute together. The world of education thinks that they know better what to impart, and the world of work is going in its own direction. We are very glad to see some major reforms, for example, as the additional secretary has seen, bringing the world of education and world of work together. How is it? What we heard, the examples of Germany and Korea. I was particularly impressed on how some of the major reforms that India itself is rolling out can be, the world can benefit. So in terms of the public policy implications, I would like to place for your consideration a few thoughts. If lifelong learning and skills development has to be realized from the throughout the life perspective, is there a need to shift our focus from just only initial education to a lifelong learning paradigm? So lifelong learning is a guiding principle of education, not just the initial acquisition of education and skills. I'm sure a lot is already happening, but something to think about. Right now, the schools and education system is very much focused on initial acquisition of skills and lifelong learning, initial education of the skills and qualifications. But if people have to change jobs, as Sukti has put it, multiple transitions is the way of life today. One job for life is thing of the past in many occupations. If people have to go through multiple occupations, whether our education system is catering to that or not, do we need to look at it fundamental changes in the way we are delivering our education, just from the initial acquisition to empowering people throughout their active stages of life? Do we need to look at a new ecosystem for skills and lifelong learning, for skilling, reskilling, and upskilling? If people have to undergo multiple transitions, what does it mean? What are some of the key elements that we see world over people are looking at? New generation skills and lifelong learning policies, basically locating them in the economic policy and the fiscal policies of the countries, but take a lifelong learning perspective, meaning how can we also empower the existing workers if they're losing jobs, if they have to change a job, if they have to move to another sector, what sort of support is available? The process of social dialogue, I think this is very important. The whole of government approaches, the additional secretary government of India said, several ministries and departments have the important role to play. I think India is a very good example now by these certain policy measures like the whole issue of Minister of Skills Development. I think the purpose itself is to really provide a whole of government approach. Increasingly, this is what is the realization that the world is going through. But more importantly, as we heard, the German example that the colleague has showcased, one of the 5 success mantras that they have shown is the real role that they provide for employees and workers organizations, not just consultative role, it's a decision-making role in all aspects of skills acquisition, reskilling, and upskilling. Can we really make it happen? That's a question before us. I will not go into all other aspects of the elements because of the time. but my colleague Gabriel has already dealt with it. I just also want to highlight that the changing nature of work and changing nature of skills are requiring people to be continuously updating and continuously learning. So we need to look at the foundational skills also to include the learning to learn skill. For example, people will have to, earlier we thought the education is over, you throw away the books with your certificates or the degrees, but now we are paradoxically saying people have to get involved in lifelong learning. Oh, is it really necessary? If so, are they ready? Are people ready to be involved in lifelong learning? If so, how can we inculcate such a thinking from the early childhood so that people have that ability to learn and learn to unlearn? Similarly, some of those core skills my colleague Gabriel has highlighted. The need to look at, for example, digital skills nowadays is necessary for almost any person walking the earth. So can we integrate digital skills and green skills into the core skills? These are some of the transferable skills, some call it 21st century skills. We need to look into that. The issue of social inclusion is very, very important. And skills recognition. For example, if lifelong learning has to be a reality, how do we empower people by recognizing those skills in an affordable way, credible way, reliable way, just like a Microsoft or a Google does on a continuous basis? Every 6 months, every 1 year, they do certificates. They do a lot of certification, which is very much recognized by the employers. But we are relying a lot on university certificates given 20 years ago, 30 years ago to people, but the skill sets that they possess today do not be represented by those university certificates. But how do we empower it? Public policy, how do we really come up with a recognition system that is dynamic and that captures the current needs of the people? I just want to touch upon the skills and migration for Kerala and India and South Asia is very, very important topic. A lot is happening. You're doing great work. I just want to bring to your attention that at the global level, we recently launched a global skills partnership on migration with ILO, UNESCO, IOM, the International Organization of Migration, and also International Organization of Employers and International Trade Union Confederation. This is a very important partnership to really look at mutual recognition of skills and qualifications across the countries at global level and in regions. Those are interested, could link with our colleagues in Delhi office. Similarly, at the global level, everybody wants to reduce mismatch and everyone wants to work with the private sector, but the question is how? In spite of our open invitation to private sector, if it is not happening, if it is not working, how do we learn to really work more with apprentices? Apprenticeship system, for example, close with the industry. So this issue is a subject of the International Labour Conference discussions in 22 and 23 towards setting a new global standard on apprenticeship. We look forward to India playing a very important role in this global standard setting. I just want to basically share a few examples of some of the new models that are emerging on lifelong learning and skills financing. Last two slides. If you see this one, France has come up with this new program called Personal Learning Account Scheme. Every person of working age can access $500 per year, euros per year, to involve in any skill that the person wants to acquire. These are all existing workers. For example, a photographer wants to change to a plumber. That is a difficult example I've taken, but it's not impossible. So the government offers a continuous program to people to reskill and upskill. So the beginning of the lifelong learning being realized on a universal basis. That was one of the recommendations of the ILO, ILO's Global Commission on Future of Work, a universal entitlement to lifelong learning. That is the future. Right now, we are not yet there. But for people to be able to continuously acquire, upskill and reskill, what kind of support can be given? This is an example of France. Singapore is another example in our region, which provides $500 Singapore dollars a year. 500 Singapore dollars every year for all working age population, citizens over 25 and above, to acquire and reskill and upskill anything that they want to do related to labor market, but they're free to choose. Similarly, the Netherlands has come up with a financing mechanism called individual learning accounts, more or less on the same lines that we discussed, allowing people to upskill and reskill. These are some of the new developments that are happening. Just to conclude, this is my last slide. Just to conclude, do we need to look at a new skills ecosystem that sees lifelong learning as a guiding principle, supporting people throughout the active stages of life, allowing multiple transitions in the people's life. Similarly, focusing on competencies, not just qualifications, but really the competencies that the employers and the industry recognizes. Attention to core skills, as I mentioned, the need to really empower people to acquire core skills that includes the skills like learning to learn, change, adaptability to change, communication, collaboration, teamwork, and which are becoming very important in the changing nature of work. Similarly, flexible learning options, micro learning options and flexible learning options and dynamic recognition options, and the crucial importance of social dialogue, the industry, private sector playing a very important role along with workers' organizations, and the government taking the whole of government approach, but the decision making has to be by all the three parties. These are some of the important good practices that are emerging. Thank you once again, Mr. Raman, for giving me this opportunity, and thank you for having us in this very important conference. It's a very learning opportunity for us. We are learning a lot by just joining this conference. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mr. Reddy, for your very insightful presentation. We are really delighted. I mean, your paradigm, the triple L paradigm, I may say, lifelong learning paradigm. I mean, that's quite interesting. I mean, how best we could bridge the gap between the education world and the work world. I'm sure that you may have some questions, and please check the chat box if possible. Otherwise, I could get you the questions. But sadly, we don't have much time. I'm sorry to say that. Now I'm moving on to Professor Santosh Nagratra. He's a professor from JNU. I mean, he's a known Indian macroeconomist. He's written a lot of books, and he was also the director of Applied Manpower Research, the only think tank of the Planning Commission. And he was also associated with the writing of the 12th five-year plan, and he was also the head development policy division of the then Planning Commission. And in fact, I have had a chance to work with him, and he's excellent and very loving scholar. So may I request Santosh to make your reflexive points. So sadly, we don't have much time, so please don't go beyond 8 to 10 minutes maximum.
Certainly, Dr. Raman, thank you very much. And thank you, Dr. Ramchandran and Dr. Epan for inviting me. This is the third time in the last 6 months that I've spoken on the subject of education and skills in Kerala. I'm delighted to be back. And so thank you very much for inviting me again. Let me begin by making a larger point which emerged from the international experience. And then I'll make a few points about Kerala and connect it to the international experience before I close. Forgive me. The first point I want to emphasize from Peter's presentation of his 5 characteristics of the dual system, which is what the dual system is what has made the Germany into a manufacturing superpower of the world for the last 150 years, in fact, is the point that their skill ecosystem is driven by employers and industry. Because a skill ecosystem which is driven by employers is a demand-driven system, as opposed to a skill ecosystem which is driven by the government or managed and financed by the government, which tends to be supply-driven. And in our country, by and large, our system tends to be supply-driven. And it's absolutely critical, Dr. Ramchandran, that we have to work together in Kerala on ensuring that formal industry engages in at least 4 types of activities within their enterprise and outside in engaging with you. The first is curriculum design. The second is providing internships to students, whether they are vet students or they are higher education students. The third is engaging in assessment, a subject I'll come back to, because that's something that is integral. Assessment is done by employers, by the chambers in Germany, and then also providing the fourth is placement support. Let me say a few words about Kerala's traditional sectors, where perhaps, in my views, there could be there could be focus on skill development. Skill development. The first sort of traditional sector is, of course, services. Now, my own work on employment and employability in our country tells me the following, that the services sector has been the sector which has been generating most of the jobs. And therefore, the focus, obviously, of the skill ecosystem also needs to be in the following 8 or 9 modern services sectors, which have generated most of the jobs in the last 10 to 15 years. For instance, the sale, maintenance, and promotion of vehicles. Secondly, e-commerce. Third, water transport. It's interesting. Obviously, Kerala is an ideal location for enhanced employability in water transport. Fourth is air transport. Fifth is financial intermediation. Sixth is insurance and pension funds. Then IT, and then education and health. So these could be focus areas. In respect of industry, what is striking from the German experience is the collaboration between government, business chambers, and trade unions. Now, what are the sort of manufacturing clusters? I'll come to the new knowledge economy sectors in a minute. But what are the traditional manufacturing sectors that have done reasonably well in Kerala? One is agro-processing, bamboo, coir, cashews. There's shipbuilding. And then there are a whole slew of MSMEs, which are a combination of formal and informal enterprises. In Trivandrum, there's cane products, Kollam, food, Alappuzha, Bell Metal, Kottayam, Manjeri as general engineering cluster. And I would say that one of the things that Germany is teaching us, or the duality principle is teaching us, is that formal industry could be engaged through a discussion process, through a negotiation process by the strong state that exists in Kerala, to be involved in skill development in these clusters. And I would say bring NSDC on board, that NSDC locates skill centers near these MSME clusters. Let me quickly, in the interest of time, move to the new knowledge economy sectors. We know that Kerala has enormous strengths. Everyone has spoken about them, and Kerala can become the human resource capital of India. We all know also that large multinationals from around the world have been locating their research and development centers in India. There are 800 such companies in India. And surely Kerala could put in place a formal policy framework which encourages these multinationals to locate their R&D centers in Kerala, which itself will have multiplier effects in terms of skill generation. The second point I would make is that Kerala has a very large NRI Malayali community across the globe, still does even after the returnees. And they could, I'm sure they are reasonably well off to fund startup activities through venture capital funding in Kerala. And the Kerala government could take action to attract this kind of foreign venture capital of Malayali NRIs for startups in the technology space and other spaces. Because currently, most of the venture capital funding in our country tends to be Chinese dominated. Baidu, Zomato, Big Basket, Ola, they all have very heavy funding from the Chinese. Let me make a third point here. There are opportunities for Kerala to be a higher education destination. So I want to make 2 or 3 points here quickly. First, the higher education gross enrollment ratio in our country shot up from 11% of the relevant age cohort of 18 to 23 in 2011, suddenly to about 26, 27%. And of course, in Kerala, it's even higher. And the trouble is that the higher education system across the country, but particularly in Kerala, is generating too many unemployables. And they are being created by the higher education system. So it's critical that at least in Kerala, you can think about diverting students early towards skill development, towards TVET, which requires obviously that you will have to increase spending on TVET rather than increasing spending on higher education. We all know that the youth unemployment rates in Kerala are among the highest in the country, and they've really shot up between 2012 and 2019. I could tell you the figures, but I won't. My next point is the following, that, drawing upon my earlier point about startup funding, it should certainly be possible for the Kerala state to promote research and industry parks near its universities. And my suspicion is that this is where HT tutoring that Professor Lee was talking about could become useful. And my final point, sort of drawing upon several speakers already, is that COVID has accelerated digitization. Now, we also know that Kerala's internal penetration of internet is at 54%. My data might be slightly dated, but it's certainly the second highest among Indian states. So Kerala universities could offer many more online courses across the country, but also across Kerala itself, to improve the employability of our students. And my finally, I want to draw upon 3 points which are critical from the learnings from Germany. Peter works for an organization called BIBB, which I visited, and I have many friends there. This organization has 600 staff. This is a research organization. And this was, this is the point he made. The fifth of his 5 points was about research. And we have very little research going on in the whole TVET space. And Kerala should certainly learn from the BIBB experience. Point 1. Point 2, another point that Peter rightly made, and I've already made this point, that industry employers are integral to assessment. In other words, you can't have independent standalone assessors who have no stake in the employability of that stake. Only employers and industry people will find out whether the person is not just meeting standards, but is also has the competencies, the point that Srinivas Reddy made. And so it's absolute, and the final point I would close with is the following, from Peter's presentation again. Germany offers 326 courses, not 2,000 qualification packs, which are for job roles. Qualification packs are meant for job roles, which might be integrating some 6,000 to 7,000 national occupation standards. They have occupation standards, but they don't have qualification packs. So, I've written about this. 10 years ago, I wrote the National Skills Qualification Framework document for the MHRD, which became the national policy, and which is what Mr. Tiwari was talking about. But you may also wish to perhaps read my latest paper in the career working paper series called the National Skills Qualification Framework for India, Promise and the Reality. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Santosh Mehrotra. Thank you so much. I'm sure that you have several things to say about this because you have been working on it and brought out a few books on that. And I know that you have always been engaged in that sort of debates. Thanks for your comments on Kerala in particular, with a focus on the knowledge economy that we really wanted to develop. Thank you so much. Now I invite Professor Jima Luni. She's from Amrit Modi School of Management, Ahmedabad University. Jima was the director of the Institute of Rural Management, the famous institute in India, in Anand. She was also a chair professor of economics at IRMA. Jima, please, and there is a time constraint, sorry to say that.
Sure, no problem.
Please don't go beyond 10 minutes.
So thank you very much, Kerala Looks Ahead, for the invitation to speak here. And thank you for all those really fascinating presentations of various countries, and also Santosh's talk on what Kerala could do. So I'm going to kind of be a dampener in all this and have kind of a small reality check. First and foremost, we must see that India and perhaps many other developing countries are, if you look at our levels of education, our mean years of schooling, is really quite low. It's its averages less than 10, slightly higher for women and than men. And even if you take just regular salaried employment, our mean years of schooling is 12. That means that on average, children get up to the 10th standard. That's also a big call, or they get up to the 12th standard. Now, all these very large, big ideas that we have seen so far, all the technology intensive ideas that we've been putting forward, we are really mounting all this on this kind of a very low base. So we should consider a little bit more about what are we going to do to strengthen that base. So for that, let's go back to our schools and colleges, where basically the children are learning their basic skills. Besides basic skills, they're actually learning their attitude towards learning, their capacity to concentrate. These are all skills. These are all skills, really. You don't realize that they are skills, but if you teach in a classroom, you can see that these are skills which are kind of lacking in our children. So focus should also be on our schools and colleges. It was very fascinating to hear that children are moving from private schools to public schools in Kerala. But then, what are they delivering in those public schools also? So Professor Joo-Ho Lee was talking about learning to learn. Basically, that's what this means, learning to learn. And he was talking about project-based learning. Now, that is something that most of our schools and colleges should be doing rather than lecture-based systems. Of course, our university does this all the time, but then it's much easier for engineering colleges and technical skills and science people to teach this project-based learning. For humanities and economics, we really have to think, and our teachers really need some amount of training to be able to do project-based learning, to be able to keep the children concentrated and be able to absorb what you're saying rather than the theoretical lecture mode. And that brings us to what I think, who was speaking about this, bringing the world of education and the world of work together. So one of the ways to enhance learning by the children, I think it was Srinivas, is internship. And there is nothing like internship at undergraduate levels. Postgraduates generally have an internship program where you actually put these children in a real life situation, and they go to the enterprises and they really learn what it is, this world of work that you're talking about, what it actually is, whatever it may be, engineering or economics or management or whatever it is. Since you spoke about the Institute of Rural Management where I was earlier, they have a fantastic internship program which goes on 3 times in their 2 years, and the children, I think they learn most of what they learn right there, being put with these organizations that they have to really deal with. So internships, it also not just having internships, it's also that the colleges and universities should be able to have some kind of career development cells, which will then help to place these students in internships. That is what IRMA has done beautifully. They have like 300 organizations who are just dying to get their children, trying to get the students at IRMA to their organizations to do internships. And it is a longer, 2-month long internships. So with that, I'll just come up with a few suggestions that I have. Again, I am focusing my suggestions of incentivizing based on the current systems that we have of the existing schools, colleges, and universities and so on that we have, not trying to build any new architecture. There, of course, the MSDE and NSDC has done a really good job of that. And I've also been watching when NSDC started these procedures, was part of some of those sector skill councils and so on. The thing is to be able to get schools, colleges, and enterprises to actually take these up themselves. So some kind of an incentive system for skill training and technical education in undergraduate colleges, both technical and non-technical, for these colleges and institutions which are able to actually place their students not just in jobs, but in internships, have successful placement systems, and other incentive structure for firms and organizations that undertake on-the-job skilling. So this whole concept of learning and relearning and reskilling and so on. Our professor Gabriel Bordedo had given a very interesting example of some of this reskilling can be done through short videos. So, what pedagogy you use in the class or in your whole system is also very important. The short lectures, quizzes, for whole range. In fact, this COVID has taught us a lot because we had to shift to this Zoom business in classes, and n number of new activities we had to devise in order to be able to keep the attention of the students who are standing behind this blank wall. And the third thing is to incentivize educational institutions and enterprises to maintain diversity. So now diversity of various kinds is an extremely important learning device. Diversity not just in terms of gender, social, economic status, but also in terms of the subjects that you're learning. So in our university, if I'm teaching economics, I have children from commerce, management, and I even have engineering students sitting in my class to learn economics. That has other than, they're learning a new subject and trying to learn to appreciate another discipline, which is extremely important, because ultimately all new jobs we're going to get are going to be jobs which work in teams. Nobody's going to be working alone anymore. They're all working in teams, good jobs. So to be able to appreciate another discipline is one thing, but also we do a lot of group learning, group assignments, everything is done in groups. So there also they learn, the engineering person comes with a very different mindset and his whole thinking is different. The economist comes with something else. The management people are just struggling to understand the language that you use. And they tell you, ma'am, the first 2-3 classes, it took us some time to understand the language you're using because I use the language of an economist, obviously. So these are kind of 3 things to incentivize. So I think Shupti said a very interesting thing about how the new generation feels that they are going to have less fulfilling careers than their parents or their grandparents. Actually, this is a reality. I've actually had students come and tell me that you and our parents have had very interesting careers, but then, we don't know. So what is that? And that's where this lifelong learning question comes, which, Vanita was just asking, what is that? Is it because of job insecurity or what is it? So there again, we have to stress that whole idea, because everything that we are saying is a very supply driven thing, but there has to be a demand, and the demand also has to come from the children, from the students, from the people who we are saying are going to learn, relearn, etc., etc. They have to be a kind of there again, your colleges and schools are very important, which which is able to convey to them that the only way you're going to learn is not to mug up the theory in economics that I'm teaching you. Only way you're going to learn is to be able to understand the concept and to actually apply it. So that whole, that thing that Srinivas had put, apply this, create up to the level of create and so on. But so continuous learning, reskilling, and a mindset to learn. These are some things that we have to instill in our children right from school, and then in college, and then later on, and then in your workspaces. Only then all these big, supply structures that you're putting up, which are fantastic, but then somebody has to be able to absorb it as well. So your aspirations, your pathway, and so on and so forth that you're saying is basically based on this. So I have a couple of questions for some of our speakers. Professor Joe Hooley is not here. For Peter, about the skills for the web teachers. Yeah, I'll end now.
Please.
Yeah, right. Question of how do you develop these skills? And Shruti had this whole issue about institutions not being there. But then, what is it that, what are those institutions that are lacking in developing countries which will allow us to get there? So I thank you very much, and I'll stop here.
Thanks, Professor Jimoloni. I'm sure that the speakers may like to respond to you, and I could also find some questions or rather some positive comments coming up when you were speaking, supporting your statements on this what is called lifelong learning. Prasanna Singh, for instance, has acknowledged you by saying that what you are saying is actually true, and the industries should provide, the interns some kind of employment. Then only they could think of what is called the kind of lifelong learning that they would require in the beginning. Dear friends, actually, we are running short of time, sadly. Maybe my poor time management, I'm sorry about that. But one good thing about the discussion is that some of the speakers have already answered to the questions that have come up in the chat box. Say, Srinivas has answered to Neeta, for instance, and Srinivas also has answered to Vanida Mukherjee. Vanida has raised a question of, again, it is about the triple L paradigm, and how come the question has come up? Is it in the context of neoliberal context that we are bound to discuss this question and like that? And Neeta has asked the question about the what is called the social inclusion, and the very fact that the industry has got this prejudice leading to women's exclusion and marginalization is also to be taken into account, if at all we really wanted to have a genuine discussion on that sort of issues. And some others also have raised questions. Some of you might have, yeah, Peter has already answered to some questions. So what I'm going to do is that the speakers may take 1 to 2 minutes maximum, if you don't mind. So in case you don't feel like responding, then that's again fine. So shall I invite the speakers? I mean, just to make the response in 1 or 2 minutes, beginning with Peter.
First of all, anyone who has more detailed questions regarding my presentation may just email me. Have a look at the presentation. There's an email address. I also put my email address in the chat. So more detailed questions, more materials needed, please kindly contact us at GoBET. I would like to answer 2 questions or make some remarks. Number one, a huge concern seems to be that when you have something like dual training, that the investment that the company puts into the apprentice might get lost once the apprentice leaves the company. This is true. Now in Germany, it's not allowed to sign something like a bond that limits the mobility of the apprentice. That's not allowed. Of course, other countries may have to do something like that. Now in Germany, if I lose one apprentice, I can find 2 more in the job market. Therefore, when the dual system is so widespread, this problem is smaller. Another aspect is that you must make apprentices while they are in training. You must make them productive already. The whole point of the dual system is that the apprentice learns in the work process. There are no simulated activities in the companies, but he is really working. That means he is productive, and should he leave earlier or should he leave after his apprenticeship, he has also contributed to the success and the turnover of the company already. This is one aspect of the dual system that makes this problem a little bit smaller. Second question was regarding the training of trainers in Germany. How do we train them? We have, as I said, we have teachers in schools. That is, of course, normal university studies that's regulated by the government. Teacher training, of course, there's a teacher exam that these people do in front of a government examination board. And the trainers within the companies, they must definitely have a vocational training themselves, must have undergone vocational training themselves. And then in each company, you need at least one person who has a pedagogical qualification which you can acquire from any chamber in Germany. So this is a training of trainers program in a crash course. This would be in 2 weeks. Normally it's a bit longer, and that's one examination, and you can take this at any chamber. The preparation you can do even with private providers. So there's a standard training course that's also approved by the government, and this is how we educate our trainers. So these were 2 small remarks regarding the questions that I found in the chat. And as I said, if you have more questions, kindly email us and we will handle those.
Thanks, Peter. Thank you so much for your liberality. I mean, you have supplied your email to our learned participants. Thank you so much. I am sure that a few of them may get in touch with you. So, Sukhi Dasgupta, would you like to?
Yes,
yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Jimol, for the question, and I'll be very quick. I think we should we all agree that what we would like to move towards is a system or systems which are more inclusive. And for that, labor market institutions or other kinds of institutions are absolutely key. And what do I mean by labor market institutions? I mean, institutions, for example, when we see the growth of gig work, which is, offering a kind of employment and income to many young people, but at the same time, there are concerns about whether they're getting the kind of income that is commensurate with the work they're doing, whether they're protected. So there has to be some form of regulation which regulates this whole area of new works that are coming up in the digital economy. So institutions around that, institutions around voice representation, institutions around gender responsive policies, because otherwise we risk moving towards a future which is excluding more and more people, not only women, but also the low skilled, the less advantaged, the disabled, etc. So what I mean by institutions is institutions which will create a more inclusive, more socially just society. I can talk for hours on this, but let me stop here. Thank you.
Thanks, Sukhi. Thank you so much, Sukhi Dasgupta. Thank you so much. And what is this? And you have also already answered to some of the questions raised by Asha and Paramita Majunda and others. Thank you so much. And may I now invite Gabriel?
Yeah, thank you very much.
If you have some
thank you very much, sir. Yeah, this is just a very quick response in terms of the way forward for India. I think particularly Kerala, really looking at the primary or the vital interventions, would really focus on the skills needs anticipation. Really, I mean, with the trend, the impact of the transformation scenarios like the digitalization, the climate change, there should be an honest to goodness skills needs anticipation. That's one vital initiative that we should have. The second one is really addressing the quality assurance of the delivery system. The MSD and the NCVET in particular are on the right track in terms of looking on monitoring and enforcement of a quality assurance system, particularly for the delivery, the training organizations, the assessment organizations. And we're looking at saying what are the factors that are hindering in terms of compliance with these provisions. And the third one really focus on the mobility of students and workers. I mean, India is a big country and really looks at having 2 levels of mobility, one internally from other states to other states, and the other one which is from India to other countries. There's need to be some sort of interventions on these 3 aspects. Over, thank you.
Thank you so much, Gabriel. And I now move on to Mr. Atul Kumar Tiwari. I'm not sure whether he is around. He's so busy a person. So, Atul Kumar Tiwari, he may not be around. So may I move on to Mr. Srinivas B. Reddy for 1 or 2 minutes quick comment?
Thank you very much, Mr. Ravi Raman. Thanks for providing this opportunity again. Just to take up the question raised by Neeta regarding gender discrimination and women continue to be discriminated against in the labor market. That's a very important point. And you raised a very good point of really the whole skills and lifelong learning, not just looking at the market dimension, but very importantly, to first look at the people dimension. This is what the ILO recommendation 195. I would invite you to please take a look at it. It says that first look at the people needs, people aspirations, their ambitions, their priorities, and then try to match with the needs of the labor market. But the gender discrimination in TVET and skills development continues to be very high, virtually in all parts of the world. We were seeing some data point, even in Europe, the women participation in some of the high-paying jobs in digital economy, for example, is still low compared to the men. So there is that need for investing in women's education in the, for example, the STEAM skills and the continued importance of empowering women to be able to access those jobs is very important. But systematically addressing the gender issues in all the skills and lifelong learning policies and breaking the stereotypes. We have seen that many training programs, particularly TVET programs, they're even sometimes offered, these are the trades for boys and these are trades for girls. You see, for example, tailoring is usually offered. It used to be, I hope it has changed, usually offered for women, and then something like a plumbing or a welding is offered for men. Today, we have seen all over the world that women and men can do every and any occupation. So there needs to be specific and concrete measures to gender mainstreaming, and so that men and women have the opportunities to get skills and access the labor market. And also from the labor market point of view, working with the private sector and businesses to see that women have opportunities without any discrimination is equally important. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mr. Reddy. Thank you so much. I hope, I'm sure whether Atul is around. Atul Tiwari is around? No. Okay, so I must say that it's a wonderful discussion we had. A whole range of issues came up, and most of the issues, basically, we really wanted to learn from you like this, and we may continue this dialogue because basically skills and skills culture, I would say, is about continuity and change, and it's more about change than continuity. So obviously, we need to continue our discussion. And now may I invite my colleague, Dr. Bindu P. Varghese, for a vote of thanks.
Good evening to all. So now we have reached the end of this resourceful session. I am sure that everyone who participated in the session would agree with me that it was indeed a very insightful and engaging session on the issue of skill development. I am also sure that many of the points articulated here would certainly be taken forward and explored further and may even become instrumental in changing or shaping the whole discourses of skill development in Kerala and even outside. With these words, let me express our deeply felt gratitude to the speakers and participants gathered here. On the first onset, on behalf of the State Planning Board, let me thank Sri T.P. Ramakrishnan, Honorable Minister of Labour and Excise, and Srimati K.K. Shailaja Teacher, Honorable Minister of Health and Social Justice, for their presence and introductory remarks. The distinguished speakers today have all very generously shared with us their knowledge about the best practices followed in their respective national contexts, as well as the skill scenario at the national and international levels. I extend my and my department's sincere gratitude to Professor Juho Lee, Peter Reshman, Mr. Siras Gupta, Mr. Gabriel Espodado, Mr. Adul Kumar Tiwari IAS, and Mr. Srinivas Reddy. I also take this opportunity to thank today's discussants who, through their keen observations, contributed creatively to today's discussions. Thank you, Professor Santosh Malhotra and Professor G. Moluni. I also extend my sincere thanks to Professor K. Reviraman, Member State Kerala State Planning Board, who chaired the session, and Professor Miduru Ipan for delivering the welcome address. Any program requires meticulous planning and steering leadership for its success. I take this opportunity to thank our Honorable Vice Chairperson, Professor V.K. Ramachandran, has played a central role in organizing this whole event from its conception. I remember that our Honorable Vice Chairperson and members have guided us at each and every step of this event. The delegates and participants for this session include eminent personalities, scholars, and academicians, and also students from various institutions. Many of them have participated through our YouTube and Facebook Live pages. I would like to express my heartfelt thanks to each and every one of them for being part of the session. Before closing, let me also remind that session on higher education will begin immediately after this, and those who are interested may kindly join the session through the link shared in the chat box. Once again, thank you all. Sir, can we end the session?
Yeah, yeah. It is closed now. This is now. You may attend the other one. Sorry about that.